Chapter 100. After hearing Feng Yongfu's guarantee, Zhang Meng was relieved. To be honest, he was really afraid that Feng Yongfu would build a shoddy project for him to save money. That would be terrible. Zhang Meng looked around and pointed to an inn next to him. I'll stay here tonight. If there's anything, you can find me here. Chen Zhongxiong and the others noted down the name of the inn and nodded in agreement. Now that the matter was settled, Chen Zhongxiong and the others did not stay any longer. They called for someone to drive the carriage out of the city. Looking at the backs of Chen Zhongxiong and the others leaving, Zhang Meng waved to Zhang Chang. Let's go to the inn first. Early the next morning, Zhang Meng led Zhang Chang out of the inn and went straight to the city lord's mansion. Last night, Zhang Meng had thought it through. He was too unfamiliar with this world. It was better to find someone who was familiar with this world to help him with this matter. Zhang Meng did not know many people. So far, other than the people in the village, he only knew 2 people in the Anwu kingdom, Fan Shouwu and Zhang Qiuming. When they parted, they had originally agreed to meet in 5 days at the Kulai Inn and pay the gold coins on the way. Now that 3 days had passed, there were still 2 days before they met. However, Zhang Meng could not wait any longer. He decided to go to Qingzhufu to see Zhang Qiuming and ask him to do something for him. In Zhang Meng's opinion, this should be the fastest way. The 2 of them left the inn and went straight to the city lord's mansion. Although Zhang Meng did not know the way, Zhang Chang did. The 2 of them walked along the bustling streets and soon arrived at the city lord's mansion. When the 2 of them arrived at the entrance of the city lord's mansion, they saw a carriage parked in front of the gate. Beside the carriage, there was a young man in his 20s, wearing a long gown. He was directing 4 servants to move 2 large chests from the carriage. Zhang Meng ignored them and led Zhang Chang straight to the gates of the city lord's mansion. In front of the main gate of the city lord's mansion, there was a small team with 8 guards standing upright on both sides, closely monitoring the people entering and exiting. Zhang Meng stepped forward and cupped his fists towards the guards. May I trouble you to inform Prince Zhang, Zhang Qiuming, that I have an important matter to discuss with Prince Zhang. A guard who was standing closest to Zhang Meng glanced at Zhang Meng's clothes from the corner of his eye, then turned his head and asked casually, "What do you want?" Zhang Meng said, "I would like to ask for Prince Zhang's help." At this moment, Zhang Meng felt someone patting him. He quickly turned his head and saw the young man who was directing the servants to unload the chests, patting his shoulder with a folding fan. The young man saw Zhang Meng turn his head and smiled. "I am the young master of the Guolai restaurant, Li Wenshan. May I know who you are? What business do you have with Prince Zhang?" Zhang Meng heard this and could not help but frown. "This matter doesn't seem to have anything to do with you." Li Wenshan heard this and waved his hand. "Little brother, from the looks of it, is it that your family is short of food and you want to ask Prince Zhang to reward you with 2? Zhang Meng's attire was indeed easy to misunderstand. Li Wenshan was wearing a silk gown, looking extraordinary. Zhang Meng, on the other hand, was wearing a coarse cloth. From afar, he looked like a country bumpkin. Zhang Meng heard this and frowned even more. "What business do I have with Prince Zhang? It doesn't seem to have anything to do with you." Li Wenshan waved his hand and sneered. "I didn't guess wrong, did I? That's your purpose. Prince Zhang is busy and has no time to deal with people like you. Hurry up and go back. Otherwise, Prince Zhang will chase you away when he sees you." Zhang Meng was amused by Li Wenshan. Was this guy crazy? What did it have to do with him that he came to see Zhang Qiuming? Li Wenshan saw that Zhang Meng did not speak and thought that he guessed right, so he continued. "In this world, there are always people who want to eat and drink for free. Whenever I see such people, I get angry." Li Wenshan's eyes turned cold. "Now I will count to 3. Hurry up and get out of my sight." 1, 2. Li Wenshan counted. When he counted to 2, he suddenly covered his face with both hands and screamed loudly. Seeing this, a few servants hurried forward and surrounded Li Wenshan to see what happened. Young master, what happened to you? Ouch, ouch, my tongue, it hurts so much, ah. After a long while, the 4 servants finally understood. It turned out that their young master was too excited just now and bit his own tongue while counting. He bit it so hard that he almost bit off the entire tip of his tongue. Li Wenshan was in so much pain that he couldn't stop screaming. His screams were so mournful that the guards of the city lord couldn't help but look over. In the end, one of the guards nodded to a guard beside him and signaled with his eyes. The guard immediately understood and hurried down the steps in front of the door. He waved his hand to Li Wenshan's servants and said loudly, "Hurry up and pull your young master to the side. What is going on with him screaming in front of the castellan's mansion? Those who don't know will think that we are bullying him." Hearing this, Li Wenshan's servants hurriedly pulled Li Wenshan to their carriage. "Young master, let's hurry up and find the doctor." At this moment, Li Wenshan was in so much pain that he wanted to die. He covered his face and wanted to reprimand the servants, but he couldn't open his mouth. He could only cover his face and run to the carriage. When he ran to the front of the carriage, Li Wenshan suddenly turned around and pointed to the 2 boxes that were being carried down, indicating for the servants to pull them back. The servants hurriedly lifted the boxes and put them back on the carriage. Then, they drove the carriage back the way they came. Seeing that Li Wenshan and the others had left, Zhang Meng smiled at the guard who was walking down the steps and said, "Well, now it's quiet. Can I trouble this brother to inform Prince Zhang?" After hearing Zhang Meng's words, the guard turned his head to look at the leader. Seeing this, the leader of the guards turned his head to look at Zhang Meng. "Why do you want to see the young master?" Zhang Meng said, "I have some matters that I need your help with. I'll have to trouble you to inform them." "Does our young master know you?" Zhang Meng nodded. "Originally, I had an appointment with Prince Zhang to meet in 5 days at the Kulai restaurant, but I have an urgent matter to discuss with him, so I came early." Hearing this, the leader of the guards asked, "What's your name? We can go and inform him." Zhang Meng said, "You just have to tell Prince Zhang that Zhang Meng wants to see him." After hearing Zhang Meng's words, the leader of the guards signaled to the guard beside him with his eyes, telling him to go and report. Seeing that the leader had agreed, the guard didn't dare to delay and immediately turned around and ran towards the door. Chapter 101. Zhang Meng did not wait for long outside the door before the guard, who went to report, hurriedly ran back. "Young master invites you in." Zhang Meng nodded and followed the guard into the city lord's mansion. Soon, the guard led Zhang Meng to the small reception room in the backyard. As soon as Zhang Meng walked into the reception room, he saw Zhang Qiuming and Fan Shouwu welcoming him. "The fierce brothers, I thought we would have to wait 2 days before we meet again. I didn't expect to meet again so soon." Zhang Meng nodded. "I'm here to ask for your help?" The 3 of them chatted as they sat down. After the servants served tea, Fan Shouwu turned to look at Zhang Qiuming. "Have you prepared the gold coins?" Zhang Qiuming nodded, took out a silver note, and handed it to Zhang Meng. "The fierce brothers, this is a total of 10,000 gold coins in silver note. Take a look and see if the number is correct." Zhang Meng took the silver note, glanced at it, nodded, and put it away. After Zhang Meng put away the note, Fan Shouwu asked again, "The fierce brothers, why are you here this time?" Zhang Meng thought for a moment before saying, "You know that I want to build an auction house in Twin Bull Mountain, but no one knows how to design houses. I heard that there's a person with the surname Fong in the South Commandery who specializes in designing houses, so I want to ask you to help me invite him to design the style of the auction house." Fan Shouwu was stunned when he heard this before saying, "I know the person you're talking about, but the person who told you about this person definitely doesn't know about it." After Zhang Meng heard Fan Shouwu's words, he smiled and said, "I think so too. That's why I came here to find out what's going on." Zhang Qiuming turned to look at Fan Shouwu and asked doubtfully, "Could it be that he's talking about the Tianji sect?" Fan Shouwu nodded. In the entire South County, Only the people from the Tianji sect are the best in this aspect. When Zhang Meng heard this, he couldn't help but be stunned. Tianji sect, what kind of place is that? Do they even know how to design houses? Fan Shouwu nodded. The Heaven's Secrets sect specializes in designing all kinds of houses, as well as some secret mechanisms and the like. It could be said that the Heavenly Secrets sect was not only famous in South County, but they were also second to none in the entire Anwu kingdom. The sect leader of the Tianji sect is surnamed Fang Tianji. When Zhang Meng heard this, he couldn't help but ask, "Is this Tianji sect that powerful?" Fan Shouwu nodded. "It's indeed very powerful. 20 years ago, Fang Tianji once designed a secret passage for a treasure pavilion in the imperial capital." At this point, Fan Shouwu stopped talking and looked at Zhang Meng, explaining for him. The treasure pavilion in the imperial capital can be considered the largest auction house in the Anwu kingdom. There are countless rare treasures inside. Among them, there are many large families that place their treasures in the treasure pavilion for safety. In order to ensure the safety of these treasures, the treasure pavilion's owner once spent a large sum of money to hire a few top experts to guard them. Unfortunately, even though the treasure pavilion had these top experts guarding it, there were still cases of treasures being lost. Helpless, the treasure pavilion's owner invited Fang Tianji from the Heaven's Secrets sect to redesign the treasure pavilion. Fang Tianji did not disappoint. After spending 3 years, he finally completed the new treasure pavilion. From then on, nothing has been lost in the treasure pavilion. At this point, Zhang Qiuming also sighed. Back then, the few top experts that the treasure pavilion invited were all outstanding figures from the few large sects in the Anwu kingdom. Even so, they still couldn't see those treasures. Fan Shouwu nodded. This is mainly because there are too many precious items in the treasure pavilion. Too many people want to obtain these treasures. As the saying goes, 2 fists are no match for 4 hands. I once heard that 20 years ago, before Fang Tianji rebuilt the treasure pavilion, there was once a total of 21 thieves who snuck into the treasure pavilion. Furthermore, they fought with several experts who were guarding the treasure pavilion. Although the top experts' martial arts were powerful, there were too many thieves. They divided up the work and didn't want to defeat the experts. They only sent some people to restrain them while others went to steal the treasures. At that time, the treasure pavilion suffered heavy losses. It was also because of that incident that the treasure pavilion's owner invited Fang Tianji to rebuild the treasure pavilion for them. After Zhang Qiuming heard Fan Shouwu's words, he also nodded. Indeed, since the new treasure pavilion was built, although there were still many thieves who went to steal the treasures, they couldn't break through the layers of mechanisms and secret passages. In the end, the good ones returned empty-handed, and the bad ones died in the mechanisms and secret passages. Since then, the treasure pavilion has never lost anything. Although there are still many people who covet the treasures in the treasure pavilion, no one has been able to successfully obtain them. After Zhang Meng heard Fan Shouwu and Zhang Qiuming's introduction, he was overjoyed. He wanted to build the best auction house, so there would definitely be a lot of treasures inside. If he was in the auction house, then it would be fine. No one would be able to steal anything from the auction house. However, if he wasn't in the auction house, then what should he do? Relying on the people in the mountain stronghold would definitely not work. Zhang Meng originally planned to invite a few experts to guard the auction house, so that thieves wouldn't take advantage of him when he wasn't there. Now it seemed that if he could invite Fang Tianji to design an auction house for him, then wouldn't it be the best of both worlds? Thinking of this, Zhang Meng suddenly thought of a problem. He hurriedly asked, "You said that the treasure pavilion was built 20 years ago. Then, how old is this Fang Tianji? Is he still alive?" When Fan Shouwu heard this, he lowered his head and thought for a moment. Then, he smiled and said, "According to the time, when Fang Tianji built the treasure pavilion, he was around 50 years old. Now, 20 years have passed, so he should be around 70 years old. There shouldn't be a problem. He's definitely still alive. Zhang Meng heard this and nodded. If that's the case, then I'll have to trouble Fan Gongzi to invite Master Fang Tianji to build an auction house for me. After Fan Shouwu heard Zhang Meng's words, he was first stunned. Then, he shook his head and smiled bitterly. The fierce brothers, things aren't as simple as you think. There are countless disciples in the Tianji sect. It's already not easy to invite one of them to build an auction house for you. If you want to invite Fang Tianji to build an auction house for you personally, I'm afraid, although Fan Shouwu didn't finish his words, Zhang Meng already understood what he meant. Seeing this, Zhang Qiuming turned to Zhang Meng and said with a smile, "The fierce brothers, actually, it's enough to invite a disciple of the Tianji sect to build an auction house for you." Chapter 102. After hearing their conversation and seeing their expressions, Zhang Meng felt that the chances of inviting Fang Tianji were very slim. Thinking of this, Zhang Meng asked tentatively, "Two young masters, if we were to invite Fang Tianji to come here personally, what are the conditions?" Fan Shouwu shook his head. "It's said that Fang Tianji hasn't made a move in the past 10 years. Speaking of this, Fan Shouwu's tone paused before he continued. "Fang Tianji has 5 disciples, and each of them has extraordinary skills. They were considered first-class experts in the construction of secret passages. With these disciples, there's no need for Fang Tianji to make a move himself." Zhang Qiuming added, "The fierce brothers, don't underestimate Fang Tianji's 5 disciples. Nowadays, there are very few people who can invite these 5 disciples. Ordinary people who can invite the 5 great disciples are not ordinary people." Zhang Meng was stunned for a moment before asking, "So, when we go to the Tianji sect to invite someone to build an auction house for us, we'll only invite Fang Tianji's disciple's grand disciple?" Fan Shouwu nodded. "That's true. The fierce brothers, it seems like you really don't know anything about the Tianji sect. I'll tell you in detail, and you'll understand. It's not easy to invite Fang Tianji's disciple's grand disciple to build an auction house for you." Tianji sect. The sect leader of the Tianji sect, Fang Tianji, had only accepted 5 disciples in his life. Of course, this didn't mean that only his 5 disciples were talented, but that Fang Tianji had other plans. Anwu country was divided into 5 counties, which were the East, South, West, North, and Central counties. After the eldest disciple, Han Daozhou, finished his studies, he established a branch of the Tianji sect in the central county of Anwu country. The second disciple, Wang Qizai, established a branch in the East county. The third disciple, Sun Xinjing, established a branch in the South county. The fourth disciple, He Xiaoguang, had established a branch in the West county. The fifth disciple, Hu Daxian, had set up a branch in the North county. When Fang Tianji was young, the Tianji sect was just a small sect. It was only after his 5 disciples had completed their studies that the Tianji sect officially flourished. The 5 great disciples each established a branch in each of the 5 great counties of the Anwu country. Each of them took in a few disciples, and many people joined the Heaven's Secrets sect. From then on, the Heaven's Secrets sect officially became a large sect. Fang Tianji's 5 disciples were now the hall masters of their respective halls. It could be said that they were the top existences in the Heaven's Secrets sect. Ever since Fang Tianji's 5 great disciples had completed their training, he had not personally built any secret passages. As for Fang Tianji's 5 great disciples, ever since they had established branches in each county, they had disciples and followers. Naturally, they rarely took action personally. Therefore, Fan Shouwu said that it was not easy to invite Fang Tianji's grand disciple to build an auction house for him. After listening to Fan Shouwu's introduction, Zhang Meng finally understood what kind of person Li Liuzi was talking about. Thinking of this, Zhang Meng could not help but smile bitterly. After Fan Shouwu finished speaking, He looked at Zhang Meng and asked, "How is it? Now you understand what's going on in the Tianjin sect, right?" Zhang Meng nodded. "I really didn't expect that the person surnamed Fang who drew the house blueprint that Li Liuzi mentioned was actually the sect master of a large sect. It's really unexpected." Seeing that Zhang Meng understood, Fan Shouwu smiled and said, "How is it? I'm not wrong, am I? It's not easy for us to invite Fang Tianji's grand disciple." Zhang Qiuming also smiled and said, "Actually, even Fang Tianji's grand disciple is very good at building houses." At this point, Zhang Qiuming lowered his voice and said, "In the first few years, our old man invited people from the Heaven Secrets sect to design a secret room. The person who came to supervise the construction of the secret room was a disciple of the South County Hall Master, Sun Xinjing." At this point, Zhang Qiuming sighed and continued, "Sun Xinjing's disciple is not old. He is only in his 20s, but his skills are definitely top-notch. After he built it, the secret room was almost impregnable. It was impossible for outsiders to enter directly. Even if they wanted to find the entrance to the secret room, it was almost impossible." At this point, Zhang Qiuming paused. He recalled the situation at that time and continued, "I still remember that the person who built the secret room for us was called Yi Xian. After the secret room was built, Yi Xian once boasted that there were no more than 10 people in the world who could find the entrance to this secret room." After Fan Shouwu heard Zhang Qiuming's words, he smiled and nodded. He also lowered his voice and said, "It seems that your old man must have spent a lot of money to build this secret room." Zhang Qiuming nodded. "It did cost a lot, but I heard from my father that although it cost a lot, it was worth it. It was definitely worth it." Fan Shouwu smiled and nodded. He turned to look at Zhang Meng. "Brother, what do you think?" Zhang Meng thought for a moment before saying, "It seems that the people from the Heaven Secret sect are indeed quite good at building secret passages. In that case, I'm relieved." When Zhang Qiuming heard this, he lowered his voice again and said, "The fierce brothers, I think you should look for Yi Xian, who built the secret room for our family. Don't be fooled by his young age. His skills are really good. How about it? Think about it." To be honest, the person Zhang Meng wanted to invite was Fang Tianji. As for Fang Tianji's 5 disciples, Zhang Meng had never even thought about it, let alone the Yi Xian that Zhang Qiuming mentioned. When Zhang Qiuming saw that Zhang Meng did not speak, he smiled and clapped his hand. "The fierce brothers, I know what you're thinking. However, it's really impossible for Fang Tianji to come. Even his 5 disciples won't come to build an auction house for you. So, I think you should look for this Yi Xian." Zhang Meng shook his head. "I'm not very satisfied. I still want to find Fang Tianji to design an auction house for me." After Zhang Qiuming heard Zhang Meng's words, he shook his head with a bitter smile and turned to look at Fan Shouwu. Seeing this, Fan Shouwu was also in a difficult position. Even if his father was the deputy county governor of the South County, it was impossible for him to invite the sect master of the Heaven Secrets sect, Fang Tianji, to build an auction house for Zhang Meng. Fang Tianji had not built secret passages for others for many years. This was a well-known fact. Not to mention Fang Tianji, but to be able to invite Fang Tianji's 5 disciples, Fan Shouwu felt that it was a very honorable thing. However, Zhang Meng in front of him looked like he was determined to invite Fang Tianji. What should he do? Thinking of this, Fan Shouwu's eyes suddenly lit up. He turned to look at Zhang Qiuming and said with a smile, "Prince Zhang, since the fierce brothers don't believe us, we can take them to see your family's secret room. If the secret room is built well, the fierce brothers will naturally be satisfied when they see it." Chapter 103. After Zhang Qiuming heard Fan Shouwu's words, a trace of awkwardness appeared on his face. Fan Shouwu pondered for a moment and understood Zhang Qiuming's thoughts. He immediately smiled and said, "Prince Zhang, you've misunderstood. I don't want you to lead the fierce brothers to the secret room to take a look. I only want you to lead him to that room in the secret room and let him find the entrance to the secret room. Fan Shouwu turned to look at Zhang Meng. If you can't find the entrance to the secret room, then you'll naturally know how powerful the Tianji sect is. Zhang Qiuming heard this and his expression softened. He pondered for a moment before nodding. That works too. However, the secret room is in the small living room of my father's living room. I can lead you there to take a look. However, you can't openly search for it. You can only search for it secretly. You mustn't let my father find out. Fan Shouwu heard this and hurriedly nodded. Prince Zhang, don't worry. We're just going to take a look. We don't really want to enter the secret room. After Zhang Qiuming heard Fan Shouwu's words, he stood up and said in a low voice, My father isn't home at this time. We'll go there now. Fan Shouwu heard this and hurriedly stood up as well. He smiled and said, The fierce brothers, then let's go now. Zhang Meng nodded. He also wanted to see how powerful the mechanisms and secret passageways built by the Heaven's Secrets sect were. The three of them left the study and went straight to the backyard. Soon, Zhang Qiuming led Fan Shouwu and Zhang Meng to the small living room. Actually, this small living room was connected to the living room. There was a door on one side of the living room. Behind this door was the living room of Zhang Qiuming's parents. The purpose of this small parlor was to gossip when some relatives or female relatives came. Zhang Qiuming came to the door of the living room. He first knocked on the door before calling out in a low voice, Mother, are you home? A friend wants to see you. A moment later, a woman's voice came from inside the room. Brother, you're here. I was just looking for you. Just as the voice fell, the door of the living room was opened from the inside. A 16 or 17-year-old beautiful girl walked out of the room. Zhang Qiuming saw that it was this girl who opened the door and said with a smile, Xiao Yu, why are you here? After hearing Zhang Qiuming's words, Zhao's lips curled. Her lips, I'm here to see Mother, can't I? Zhang Qiuming smiled and shook his head. It's not that you can't. I remember that you should be practicing your sword at this time. Hearing this, Xiao Yu's face stiffened. It's none of your business. After saying this, Xiao Yu turned to look at Fan Shouwu and said with a grin, Big brother Fan, I want to ask you for a favor. Hearing this, Fan Shouwu hurriedly cupped his fists and said, Lady Xiao Yu, if there's anything you need, just say it. As long as I can do it, I'll definitely do it for you. Hearing this, Xiao Yu pursed her lips and smiled. A trace of joy appeared on her face. This is what you said. You can't go back on your words. Fan Shouwu nodded. Lady Xiao Yu, as long as I can do it, I'll agree. After hearing Fan Shouwu's promise, Xiao Yu said with a grin, Big brother Fan, do you know about the black feather cloak? Fan Shouwu was stunned when he heard this. Immediately, he understood what Xiao Yu was thinking. Just as he was pondering over how to answer, Zhang Qiuming had already reprimanded him. Xiao Yu, don't cause trouble here. Fan Gongzi's black feather cloak is still very useful. Don't keep thinking about it. Hearing this, Xiao Yu said disdainfully, I know. Doesn't Big Brother Fan just want to give it to Lady Fu? I don't want that one. Doesn't Big Brother Fan have 2 black feather cloaks? He can give one to me. Anyway, he can't wear something that only women wear. At this point, Xiao Yu turned her head to look at Fan Shouwu. Big brother Fan, am I right? Hearing this, Fan Shouwu didn't know how to answer for a moment. Zhang Meng had brought back a total of 60 nightmare eagle's feathers, which were enough to make 2 black feather cloak. However, when they were at the Red Mountain Peak, Fan Shouwu had already said that these 2 black feather cloaks would be given to him and Zhang Qiuming. His own black feather cloak must be given to Lady Fu. As for Zhang Qiuming's black feather cloak, Fan Shouwu knew in his heart that he definitely wanted to use this black feather cloak to curry favor with some lady. Therefore, Fan Shouwu actually only had 1 black feather cloak. However, at this moment, he couldn't explain. He could only turn his head to look at Zhang Qiuming, hoping that he could clean up this mess. Zhang Qiuming saw Fan Shouwu's gaze and hurriedly reached out to push Xiao Yu. "Let's go inside. I still have to bring my friend to see mother." Xiao Yu still wanted to explain, but Zhang Qiuming pushed her all the way into the house. After entering the house, Xiao Yu didn't dare to say anything else. In the small living room, on the main seat, sat a middle-aged woman with a face full of smiles. Seeing this middle-aged woman, Zhang Qiuming hurriedly went forward to greet her. "Mother, Big Brother Fan said that he wanted to come and greet you. Also, there's a new friend who wants to greet you." After hearing Zhang Qiuming's introduction, Fan Shouwu also hurriedly went forward to greet her. "Greetings, madam." When Zhang Meng saw Fan Shouwu go forward to greet her, he also hurriedly went forward to greet her. "Greetings, madam." Lady Zhang hurriedly waved her hand. Looking at Zhang Qiuming, she smiled and said, "Don't be so polite. Hurry and ask them to sit down and talk." After hearing Lady Zhang's instructions, Zhang Qiuming hurriedly led Fan Shouwu and Zhang Meng to the left side of Lady Zhang and sat down. After everyone sat down, Lady Zhang smiled and asked, "Fan Gongzi, have you gotten used to living in the manor these past few days?" When Fan Shouwu heard this, he nodded and said, "Thank you, madam, for your concern. I'm very good here." After asking Fan Shouwu, Zhang Meng turned her gaze to Zhang Meng. Then, she looked at Zhang Qiuming. Who is this young master? Why don't you introduce him to mother?" When Zhang Qiuming heard this, he hurriedly stood up and said, "His name is Zhang Meng. He's a good brother that Fan Gongzi and I met when we went out this time. Today, I specially brought him over to meet mother." Zhang Meng also hurriedly stood up and cupped his fist. "This one is Zhang Meng. Greetings to old madam." Lady Zhang hurriedly waved her hand. "Quickly sit down and talk. You and Amin are good friends, so there's no need to be polite here." When she said this, Lady Zhang turned to look at Xiao Yu and asked with a smile, "Just now, I heard you guys arguing outside. What was it about?" When Xiao Yu heard this, she hurriedly walked to Lady Zhang's side. She clenched her small fists and gently massaged Lady Zhang's back. "Mother, I heard that Big Brother Fan has something good. I don't know if it's true or not, so I asked him." When Lady Zhang heard this, she turned to look at Fan Shouwu and said with a smile, "Fan Gongzi, is that true?" Fan Shouwu hurriedly replied, "Yes, it is true." Lady Zhang said, "What good thing is it? Let me hear it." Chapter 104. After Fan Shouwu heard Lady Zhang's words, he hurriedly said, "It's nothing. I just got some feathers from the nightmare eagle. It's really nothing good." Lady Zhang's eyes lit up when she heard this. "The feathers of the nightmare eagle?" Fan Shouwu nodded. Lady Zhang asked, "The feathers used to make the black feather cloak?" Fan Shouwu smiled bitterly and nodded again. Lady Zhang turned to look at Xiao Yu and said with a smile, "I was wondering why our obedient Xiao Yu would covet other people's things. It turns out that Fan Gongzi has such good things. It's no wonder that girl Xiao Yu is so jealous." Xiao Yu heard this and hurriedly nodded. "That's right, mother." After saying this, Xiao Yu leaned towards Lady Zhang and looked at Fan Shouwu. She smiled and said, "Mother, I heard that Big Brother Fan has 2 black feather cloaks?" After Lady Zhang heard Xiao Yu's words, her eyes lit up again. "Oh, is that so, Fan Gongzi? Do you really have 2 black feather cloaks?" When Fan Shouwu heard this, he turned to look at Zhang Qiuming and nodded. He gritted his teeth and said, "In the beginning, there were 2 black feather cloaks. However, Prince Zhang and I each had 1. Lady Zhang heard this and was overjoyed. She turned to look at Zhang Qiuming and was about to ask when Xiao Yu, who was standing at the side, quickly ran to Zhang Qiuming's side. She pulled on his arm and asked sweetly, "Brother, is it true? Do you also have a black feather cloak?" When Zhang Qiuming heard this, he nodded helplessly. "Fan Gongzi and I do each have a black feather cloak." When Xiao Yu heard Zhang Qiuming's words, she was immediately overjoyed. She shook her brother's arm and said coquettishly, "Brother, can you give your black feather cloak to your cutest sister?" Zhang Qiuming ignored Xiao Yu's coquettishness. He waved his hand vigorously and broke free from Xiao Yu's pull. Then, he took 2 steps back and put some distance between the two. "Xiao Yu, stop fooling around. Brother still has a use for that black feather cloak." When Xiao Yu heard this and saw that Zhang Qiuming wasn't willing to give her the black feather cloak, she pouted. "Brother, you're too biased. I've always been so nice to you. Now that I have something good, you're thinking about someone else." When she said this, Xiao Yu's eyes suddenly turned. She grabbed Zhang Qiuming's arm again and begged, "Brother, just give it to me. I'm begging you, brother." When Zhang Qiuming saw that Xiao Yu was begging him again, he hurriedly dodged. However, Xiao Yu didn't give up. When the two of them were in a mess, Lady Zhang suddenly coughed. "Cough. The two of you are too much. You're making a ruckus in front of Fan Gongzi. What kind of scandal is this? I mean, as her brother, you don't even know how to give in to your sister. This is outrageous." When she said this, Lady Zhang looked at Xiao Yu. "What are you waiting for? Hurry up and come over." When Xiao Yu heard Lady Zhang's call, she didn't dare to disobey. She could only let go of Zhang Qiuming and walked back unhappily. Brother is so stingy. He doesn't care about his sister at all. When Xiao Yu walked back to her side, Lady Zhang smiled at Zhang Qiuming and said, "By the way, when Mother went to the capital, she saw someone wearing the black feather cloak. After so many years, I've long forgotten what it looks like. Can you show it to Mother?" Since Lady Zhang had spoken, Zhang Qiuming naturally didn't dare to disobey. He could only lower his head and say, "Mother, I haven't found someone to sew the feathers of the eagle of nightmares yet. When it's done, I'll show it to Mother." When Lady Zhang heard this, she nodded in satisfaction. Then, she turned to look at Xiao Yu beside her and winked slightly. Xiao Yu, who originally had a face full of disappointment, immediately understood when she saw Madame Zhang's expression. The disappointment in her heart immediately vanished into thin air. Even if you don't give me the black feather cloak, I'll ask Mother to give it to me." While they were talking, Zhang Meng didn't stay idle. Zhang Qiuming's purpose of bringing him here was to let him see the secret room designed by the Tianji sect. After greeting Lady Zhang, Zhang Meng began to observe the situation in the room. However, after looking for a long time, he still didn't find any clues. Needless to say, there was an entrance to the secret room. If Zhang Qiuming hadn't said that there was a secret room in this room, Zhang Meng probably wouldn't have known that there was a secret room in this room. Zhang Meng observed very carefully. The calligraphy on the wall, the furniture in the room, and the decorations on the furniture were all carefully examined by Zhang Meng. However, he still didn't find the secret room. Logically speaking, no matter how tightly the entrance to the secret room was built, there should be something different about it. However, there wasn't anything different at all. Seeing all this, Zhang Meng really admired the Tianji sect. The person who built this secret room was Yi Xian, the grand disciple of the Tianji sect's sect leader, Fang Tianji. Although Yi Xian was Fang Tianji's grand disciple, Zhang Meng was sure that it was impossible for him to be personally taught by Fang Tianji. It was probably not easy to be personally taught by his master, Sun Xinjing. Yet, such a grand disciple of the Tianji sect was able to build a secret room that even Zhang Meng couldn't find any clues about. This also showed how powerful the Tianji sect was. After looking for a while, Zhang Meng still didn't find any secret passageways. Helpless, he could only secretly press his hand on the wall behind him, preparing to observe the situation in the room. After Zhang Meng came to this world, although he obtained unparalleled strength, he didn't obtain any skills that could see through everything. Although Zhang Meng's strength was unparalleled, he had many weaknesses. He couldn't fly, he didn't have any skills that could see through everything, he didn't have the ability to heal and so on. Although he didn't have any extra skills, after experimenting, Zhang Meng realized that as long as the distance wasn't too far, as long as he placed his hand on an object or a person's body, he could see through everything, including walls. Zhang Meng placed his hand on the wall behind him, squinted his eyes, and transferred the energy in his body slightly to the wall. Then, the scene in front of him changed immediately. Originally, Zhang Meng could only see the surface. But now, under the support of Zhang Meng's energy, he could see everywhere in the room. Under this power, Zhang Meng could turn any object into nothingness. Or, he could even practice with it. After a while, Zhang Meng saw the entrance to the secret room. The entrance to the secret room was behind a cabinet in the corner of the room. The secret room didn't have a door. The cabinet in front of it was the door to the secret room. The cabinet was very cleverly made. A small partition on the cabinet could be used to open the door to the secret room. This partition was used to open the door to the secret room. On top of it, there was a vase with a bouquet of fresh flowers. The vase could be moved at will without affecting the secret room. Chapter 105. The switch design of this secret passage was extremely ingenious. In order to open the door of the secret room, the vase had to be removed, and then the partition would be flipped over. Only then would the door of the secret room open. The partition that opened the door of the secret room could not be flipped over by removing the vase. Instead, it needed to be moved horizontally before it could be flipped over. In this secret room, the outermost cabinet was the door. About half a meter inside, there was an iron door. This iron door, under Zhang Meng's observation, felt that this iron door was at least 10 centimeters thick. As for the way to open this big iron door, Zhang Meng also carefully examined it, but found that this big iron door did not have any mechanism to command it, only a keyhole. Zhang Meng sucked in a breath of cold air when he saw this. The entrance to this secret chamber was designed like an iron bastion. The outermost cabinet's design was ingenious. When it was closed, it was fastened to the wall tightly, and almost no trace of it could be seen. Moreover, even if you found the way to open this cabinet, you would still be helpless when you reached the iron door inside. A 10-centimeter thick big iron door, no matter how great your ability was, without a key it was impossible to open it. Zhang Meng's line of sight passed through the big iron door and explored inside. Behind the big iron door, there was a staircase leading down. Zhang Meng's line of sight followed the staircase down. At the end of the staircase, there was a secret room. This secret room was also separated from the outside by a big iron door. This big iron door, the way to open, was not with a key, but with a mechanism. In the middle of the big iron door, the head of a fierce tiger was cast. The fierce tiger was in a roaring posture, its mouth wide open, and its eyes wide open. It looked extremely terrifying. The way to open the big iron door was actually very simple. It was the fierce tiger's eyes. This was, however, the way to open it was a little different. Ordinary secret passages with hidden mechanisms, ordinary mechanisms had to be pressed in, and then the mechanism could be activated. But this secret room was the opposite. You needed to pull out the fierce tiger's 2 eyes to open the secret passage. The tiger's eyes were wide open. If he didn't know how to open it, he wouldn't know that the eyes were the mechanism to open the door. Another important point was that when they wanted to activate the mechanism, they couldn't just pull on one of the tiger's eyes. Otherwise, they would be in big trouble. If he only pulled one of the tiger's eyes, then there would be a change in front of the door of the secret room. A large guillotine would immediately fall from the top of the secret room to teach the intruder a lesson. After passing through this large iron door, there was a very large secret room. On one side of the secret room, there were dozens of big boxes. On the other side of the wall, there were a few swords and sabers. On the wall opposite the door, there were some murals. Seeing this, Zhang Meng didn't want to continue reading. After all, this was the Zhang family's secret. It wasn't good for him to read it too clearly. Zhang Meng had just finished looking at the situation of the secret room when he felt someone pat his shoulder. He quickly turned his head and saw Zhang Qiuming smiling at him. Zhang Meng said, "Prince Zhang, what's the matter? Is something the matter?" Zhang Qiuming heard this and was stunned at first. Then, he asked curiously, "Didn't you hear what we were talking about just now?" Zhang Meng shook his head. "I was thinking too hard just now. I didn't hear what you were talking about." Zhang Qiuming heard this and understood in his heart. Zhang Meng must have been looking for the secret passage, and was so engrossed that he didn't hear what they were talking about. Zhang Qiuming saw that Zhang Meng didn't hear what they were talking about just now, so he explained with a smile. "My mother wants to ask you where you got the Eagle of Nightmare's feathers." Zhang Meng was stunned when he heard this and then replied, "Don't you and Fan Gongzi know about that place? Isn't it the Red Mountain Peak?" This time, before Zhang Qiuming could ask again, Lady Zhang asked first, "Prince Zhang, it's said that the Eagle of Nightmares is not only powerful, but also has the ability to breathe fire. How did you get the feathers of such a powerful monster?" It turned out that when Zhang Meng was looking at the secret room, Lady Zhang asked about the feathers of the Eagle of Nightmares. Fan Shouwu simply confessed and told her about how he got the feathers of the Eagle of Nightmares from Zhang Meng. When Madame Zhang heard this, she was also extremely shocked. Lady Zhang naturally heard of the reputation of the Eagle of Nightmares. She originally thought that the feathers of the Eagle of Nightmares were bought by Fan Shouwu and Zhang Qiuming when they went to the Magic Empire. After all, although the Eagle of Nightmares was powerful, the Magic Empire was also full of talents and masters. It was not impossible to hunt down the Eagle of Nightmares. It was not surprising that Fan Shouwu and Zhang Qiuming could buy the feathers of the Eagle of Nightmares in the Magic Empire. However, Lady Zhang would never have thought that the feathers of the Eagle of Nightmares that Fan Shouwu and Zhang Qiuming obtained were actually from Zhang Meng. This was simply too unbelievable. Thinking of this, Lady Zhang asked. After hearing Zhang Meng's answer, Lady Zhang turned to look at Zhang Qiuming and saw that Zhang Qiuming nodded slightly. Lady Zhang was a little confused. The young man in front of her was really young. His face was childish and was not yet at the age to lie. His clothes were coarse and did not look like high-end goods. His words and actions did not have the domineering aura of a rich family's child. He was just an ordinary child, dressed differently and looked ordinary. However, when Lady Zhang looked carefully, she was shocked to find that he was just an ordinary child. He did not have the demeanor of a master at all. What was going on? How did such an ordinary person obtain the feathers of the Eagle of Nightmares? Thinking of this, Lady Zhang smiled and asked, "Prince Zhang, where did you learn from?" Zhang Meng heard this and hurriedly cupped his fists and said, "I'm from Twin Bull Mountain. I don't have a master. My martial arts were taught by my father." Lady Zhang was first stunned when she heard this, then she turned to look at Zhang Qiuming. Which sect is Twin Bull Mountain? Why haven't I heard of it before?" Zhang Meng and Zhang Qiuming went to the Red Mountain Peak together. On the way, Zhang Qiuming also asked Zhang Meng about his background. Zhang Meng naturally had nothing to hide and explained his background clearly. At this moment, hearing Lady Zhang's question, Zhang Qiuming hurriedly replied, "Mother, Twin Bull Mountain is a mountain stronghold 70 miles away from Qingmu City." Mountain stronghold? Lady Zhang was even more confused when she heard this. She suddenly turned to look at Fan Shouwu. "Is the Eagle of Nightmares really that powerful?" Fan Shouwu nodded. "When we met the Eagle of Nightmares, Lord Mu and the other 4 people from the prefectural governor's mansion were also there." When Lady Zhang heard Fan Shouwu say this, she could not help but ask, "Fan Gongzi, is the Lord Mu you're talking about the prefectural governor's mansion's chief bodyguard, Mu Hongyi?" Fan Shouwu nodded. "Yes, it's Lord Mu Hongyi." Lady Zhang asked, "Are the other people also the prefectural governor's mansion's bodyguards?" Fan Shouwu heard Lady Zhang's words and nodded again. "Yes." Chapter 106. After Lady Zhang heard Fan Shouwu's words, she was slightly relieved. With Lord Mu present, there shouldn't be any major problems. With his martial arts, he should be able to deal with the Nightmare Eagle. Fan Shouwu smiled bitterly and shook his head. That's not the case. When the Nightmare Eagle was flying in the sky, it didn't attack us. Instead, it started to breathe fire around us, setting the surrounding trees ablaze. In the end, the fire grew bigger and bigger. The fire had already sealed off all of our escape routes. Even if we wanted to escape, we couldn't. Zhang Qiuming continued, that's right. At that time, the fire was too big. If we wanted to rush out of the fire, there was no chance at all. Fan Shouwu and Zhang Qiuming had returned yesterday. They hadn't told their family about what happened when they went out. Originally, Zhang Qiuming had already met Lady Zhang this morning. However, because there was a guest visiting today, he only briefly informed his mother before leaving in a hurry. The guest that Zhang Qiuming and Fan Shouwu had to receive today was Li Wenshan. After Li Wenshan knew that Fan Shouwu had come to Qingyang City, he had wanted to ask Zhang Qiuming to introduce him to Fan Shouwu. As Fan Shouwu had just arrived at Qingmu City, he had left with Zhang Qiuming and only returned yesterday evening. In order to meet Fan Shouwu, Li Wenshan had already sent servants to stand guard in front of the Zhang residence. He ordered them to immediately report to him the moment Zhang Qiuming and Fan Shouwu returned. Therefore, Li Wenshan was able to know that Zhang Qiuming had returned in the shortest amount of time. In order to be able to meet Fan Shouwu earlier, Li Wenshan had immediately rushed to the Zhang residence after preparing the gift. As Li Wenshan wanted to discuss with Fan Shouwu, he couldn't discuss it in front of too many people. Therefore, Li Wenshan wanted to chase Zhang Meng away and meet Zhang Qiuming alone. Unfortunately, he had bitten his own tongue and had to go home to treat it. After Lady Zhang heard Fan Shouwu and Zhang Qiuming's story, she was shocked and hurriedly asked, Amin, what should we do? The fire was so big. How did you escape? Come here and let mother see if you're burned. When Zhang Qiuming heard this, he quickly walked to the side of the locals and said with a smile, Mother, you don't have to worry. I'm fine. After Lady Zhang heard Zhang Qiuming's words, she carefully sized him up and finally relaxed. Quickly tell me, how did you escape? Could it be that Lord Mu saved you? Zhang Qiuming smiled and shook his head. Mother, you don't know how big the fire was at that time. It was at least 40 to 50 meters wide. It's impossible for a person to rush through the middle. When Lady Zhang heard this, she asked curiously, Then how did you escape? Did you fly out? Zhang Qiuming smiled and nodded. Mother, you guessed right. We flew out. When Lady Zhang heard this, she was stunned at first. Then, she pretended to be angry and said, You child, after going out for a while, you've learned how to lie. Quickly tell us, how did you escape? Xiao Yu was also anxious when she heard this. She urged, Brother, hurry up and tell us. Don't keep us in suspense and make us anxious. Zhang Qiuming smiled. I didn't lie to you. We really flew out. If you don't believe me, you can ask Fan Gongzi. After Xiao Yu heard Zhang Qiuming's words, she immediately turned to Fan Shouwu. Big brother Fan, is what my brother said true? Did you really fly out of the fire? Fan Shouwu smiled and nodded. Your brother is right. We did fly out of the fire. Although we didn't fly out on our own, it's close. After Xiao Yu heard Fan Shouwu's words, she was even more confused. She quickly turned to look at Zhang Qiuming and said angrily, Brother, hurry up and tell us before we get anxious. When Zhang Qiuming heard this and saw Xiao Yu's anxious look, he suddenly smiled and said, I'm not telling you. After Xiao Yu heard Zhang Qiuming's words, she was so angry that she pointed at him and was almost speechless. You, suddenly, Xiao Yu turned around and looked at Lady Zhang with grievance. She said coquettishly, Mom, why don't you control brother? Look at how infuriating he is. He only knows how to make me angry all day long. Lady Zhang smiled and patted Xiao Yu. Then, she turned to look at Zhang Qiuming. Don't keep us in suspense. Hurry up and tell us. How did you get out of the fire? He could ignore Xiao Yu's words, but Zhang Qiuming still had to listen to Lady Zhang's words. Mom, I'll tell you. We were thrown out of the fire. What? Thrown out? After Lady Zhang heard Zhang Qiuming's words, she was suddenly stunned. However, Xiao Yu didn't believe him. She pointed at Zhang Qiuming and said, Mom, brother is too bad. Now he's even lying to you. Hurry up and control him. After Lady Zhang recovered from her shock, she looked at Zhang Qiuming. She naturally knew that her son could lie to Xiao Yu, but he would never lie to her. But, how was that possible? Lady Zhang asked doubtfully. Are you saying that you were thrown out of the fire? Zhang Qiuming nodded. That's right. We were thrown out of the fire. That's how we escaped. Lady Zhang knew martial arts. Although it wasn't very high, Fan Shouwu and Zhang Qiuming combined were definitely no match for her. Just now, Zhang Qiuming had said that the fire was about 50 to 60 meters wide. In addition, the edge of the fire was extremely hot, so they had to retreat a little further. Based on this calculation, if they wanted to get to a safe place outside the fire, they would need to travel at least 100 meters. How far was a distance of 100 meters? If they ran, it wouldn't take long. However, if they were thrown out, it would be a bit exaggerated. Lady Zhang was puzzled, but looking at her son's expression, it didn't seem like he was lying. Could it be true? Could someone really throw them out 100 meters? Could it be? Thinking of this, Lady Zhang asked tentatively, Could it be that Lord Mu threw you out? Zhang Qiuming shook his head. At that time, Lord Mu was also trapped in the fire. We also asked him. In that situation, Lord Mu couldn't do anything. Lady Zhang asked, Could it be that an outsider saved you? Zhang Qiuming shook his head. Then, he smiled and said, Mom, don't make wild guesses. The person who threw us out is right in front of us. After Lady Zhang heard Zhang Qiuming's words, she immediately looked at Zhang Meng. There were only a few people in the room. Xiao Yu couldn't have done it, and neither could Zhang Qiuming. Although Fan Shouwu's martial arts were better than Zhang Qiuming's, there was a limit to how much stronger he was. Thus, there was only one person left in the room. Zhang Meng. Looking at the young man in front of her, Lady Zhang was even more puzzled. To be able to throw someone out 100 meters, how much strength did that require? At least, Lady Zhang had never heard of such a thing. Chapter 107. As the city lord's wife, Lady Zhang was naturally knowledgeable. In her impression, she had never seen anyone who could do such a thing. Of course, it wasn't that no one could do such a thing, but it was impossible for those powerful people to appear here. Could this young man in front of her be one of those powerful people? Or could it be that he only looked young, but was actually over 100 years old? Just as Lady Zhang was puzzled, Xiao Yu said unhappily, Mother, brother is too bad. He even dares to lie to you now. Hurry up and control him. Lady Zhang ignored Xiao Yu's words and only looked at Zhang Meng. After a while, she slowly asked, Prince Zhang, is what Amin said true? Did you really throw them out of the fire? After saying this, Lady Zhang's gaze was fixed on Zhang Meng. Hearing this, Zhang Meng nodded slightly but didn't say anything. This time, without waiting for Lady Zhang to speak, Xiao Yu had already walked quickly to Zhang Meng. After looking at him carefully, she shook her head and said, I don't believe you. You must be lying. Lady Zhang heard this and quickly scolded loudly, Xiao Yu, don't be rude. How can you speak to Prince Zhang like that? Hurry up and apologize to Prince Zhang. Hearing this, Xiao Yu glanced at Zhang Meng again. Then, she shook her head and said sadly, Mother, but he doesn't look like it. After saying this, Xiao Yu turned to look at Zhang Meng and asked tentatively, Did you really throw my brother and the others out of the fire? At this point, Xiao Yu paused for a moment before adding in a low voice, Don't lie to me. Zhang Meng nodded with a smile. Your brother didn't lie to you. I really threw them out of the fire. After listening to Zhang Meng's answer, Little Red looked at Zhang Meng carefully and asked doubtfully, Do you really have that much strength? This time, before Zhang Meng could answer, Zhang Qiuming spoke first. Xiao Yu, let me tell you, even the earthen bear is not as strong as the fierce brothers. Xiao Yu's almond-shaped eyes widened. Really? You're stronger than the bear of the earth? At this moment, Lady Zhang, who was sitting at the head of the table, was feeling a little uneasy. It could throw people 100 meters away, and it was stronger than the earth bear. Just how much power was this? To be able to throw someone 100 meters away, there might be some kind of coincidence involved. This was something that could not be said for sure. However, Lady Zhang knew the strength of the earthen bear of the earth. Although she had never seen the bear of the earth with her own eyes, the bear of the earth was very famous in the Fenglin mountain range. The bear of the earth did not know any magic skills. It only relied on its brute force to make a name for itself. If one wanted to be stronger than the bear of the earth, only those peerless experts and experts who had reached the post-liminary realm would be able to do so. Could it be that the young man in front of her had already reached the post-liminary realm? Impossible. Lady Zhang had seen those experts who had reached the post-liminary realm. These people were almost all experts from the various large sections. Even if there were some young people who had reached this level, it was because the sects had spent a lot of effort to nurture them. Some large sects, in order to nurture the younger generation, would let these young people consume all kinds of spiritual herbs to increase their strength. It could be said that in this world, if one wanted to advance by leaps and bounds in martial arts, this was the only way. Of course, spiritual herbs were not cabbages. They were relatively rare. Even large sects would treat them as treasures. And the young people that the sects were willing to spend a lot of effort to nurture were all talented and intelligent people. Among those of the same generation, all of them were outstanding. Only these talented people would be nurtured by the sects with a lot of effort. Could it be that the person in front of her was one of those talented young people? Was he one of those talented young people that the large sects were willing to spend a lot of effort to nurture? Or could it be that the Twin Bull Mountain was a large sect to begin with? Only a large sect had the conditions to nurture such an expert. However, the Twin Bull Mountain was not far from Azurewood City. If there really was such a large sect, with such a peerless expert, there was no reason that Lady Zhang, who was in Azurewood City, had never heard of it. No one noticed Lady Zhang's thoughts. Zhang Qiuming saw that Xiao Yu was still doubtful, and could not help but laugh. Xiao Yu, don't doubt the strength of the fierce brothers. Everyone can prove this point. At this point, Zhang Qiuming turned his gaze back to Lady Zhang before continuing. Mother, when we went there, we encountered the Earth Black Bear. At that time, if it wasn't for the fierce brothers' help, I'm afraid we wouldn't have been able to escape. Lady Zhang heard this and calmed herself down before asking, How did Prince Zhang chase the Earth Black Bear away? Zhang Qiuming smiled as he replied, Nothing much. At that time, when we thought it was over, we saw Zhang Meng hugging a big tree and directly sent the Earth Black Bear flying. After the Earth Black Bear was sent flying, it took a long time to get up. After it got up, it immediately ran away. Ran away? Lady Zhang muttered to herself. She looked at Zhang Meng again. She never would have thought that this would happen. Zhang Qiuming continued, Mother, is there something more interesting? Lady Zhang heard this and turned her head to look at Zhang Qiuming. What is it? Zhang Qiuming said, When we came back, we met the Earth Black Bear again by the river. At that time, we were almost dying of thirst. After seeing the Earth Black Bear, we were all scared out of our wits. Even though we were so thirsty, no one went to the river to drink water. Because that Earth Black Bear was lying by the river, sleeping. Originally, we planned to go around the lower reaches of the river to drink water. However, the fierce brothers weren't afraid at all and directly brought us to the river to drink water. We drank water by the side of the Earth Black Bear. The funniest thing was that the Earth Black Bear clearly saw us but still pretended to be asleep, allowing us to drink water by its side. Mother, don't you think this Earth Black Bear is funny? After Lady Zhang heard Zhang Qiuming's words, she nodded. Although she looked calm on the surface, her mind was already in turmoil. This young man, just who is he? The Earth Black Bear has a bad temper, and almost no one dares to provoke it. Because if you provoke it, the Earth Black Bear will definitely fight you to the death. But why? Lady Zhang thought for a while before asking, when you were drinking water, did the Earth Black Bear really see you? After Zhang Qiuming heard Lady Zhang's words, he nodded vigorously. Mother, I saw it. When we went to drink water, the Earth Black Bear opened its eyes and looked at us, then closed them again. Lady Zhang looked at Zhang Qiuming doubtfully. Really? You really saw it? Zhang Qiuming nodded. Really, Mother, I'm not lying to you. At that time, Fan Gongzi was also there. If you don't believe me, you can ask Fan Gongzi. Chapter 108. After listening to Zhang Qiuming's words, Fan Shouwu hurriedly nodded and said, Indeed, we all saw the Earth Bear sleeping by the river. When we went to the river to drink water, the Earth Black Bear did open its eyes, but it only glanced at us and then closed them again. Not only that, the Earth Black Bear turned over and turned its back to us. After Fan Shouwu finished speaking, Zhang Qiuming continued, Mom, when we walked a short distance, I looked back. As soon as we left, the Earth Black Bear stood up and left. After listening to the two's words, Lady Zhang was extremely shocked. How could the tyrannical Earth Black Bear become like this? Could it be thinking of this? Lady Zhang composed herself, then turned to look at Zhang Meng and asked tentatively, When you came back, why didn't the Earth Black Bear attack you? Do you know the reason, Prince Zhang? Hearing this, Zhang Meng smiled. What other reason could there be? It was afraid that I would beat it up. After hearing this, Lady Zhang was suddenly stunned. After a moment, Lady Zhang asked again, Prince Zhang, who is your master? Can you tell us? Let us see. Zhang Meng shook his head. My martial arts are passed down in my family, I don't have a master. If there is a master, it would be my father. Other than my father, no one else has taught me martial arts. Lady Zhang was even more confused. After a while, her eyes suddenly lit up. As the wife of the mayor, she naturally knew a lot about the Greenwood City. Around Greenwood City there was indeed a big school. This big school was called Wanjian School, and the schoolmaster's name was Han Qinyun. Could it be that Zhang Meng was from Wanjian School? But that couldn't be right. Wanjian School's master's surname was Han, Zhang Meng's surname was Zhang, so his father's surname was naturally Zhang too. Could it be? The leader of Wanjian School, Han Qinyun, had 9 disciples. Could it be that Zhang Meng's father was one of the 9 disciples? Among the 9 disciples, there was indeed a disciple with the surname Zhang. His name was Zhang Lingtian. Thinking of this, Lady Zhang asked again, Prince Zhang, may I know your father's name? Zhang Meng thought for a moment. My father is called Zhang Hongtai. Zhang Hongtai? Lady Zhang was a little disappointed. It wasn't Zhang Lingtian but Zhang Hongtai. Then, she was even more surprised. Could it be that Zhang Meng wasn't from Wanjian School? Who could it be? Since she had already asked the question, Lady Zhang felt that it would be rude if she continued to ask, so she decided to get someone to investigate Zhang Meng's background later. There was such a powerful person in her territory. If she didn't find out the background of this person, it wouldn't be a good thing. Everyone chatted for a while. Zhang Qiuming gave Zhang Meng a look. He wanted to see if Zhang Meng had finished looking through the secret room. Zhang Meng saw Zhang Qiuming's look and understood what he meant. He nodded, indicating that he had already looked through it. Since Zhang Meng had already looked through the secret room, there was no need to stay any longer. Zhang Qiuming said goodbye and the 3 of them left the small living room. On the way back, the 3 of them had nothing to say. This was because they couldn't talk about the secret room in public. They could only talk about it when they returned to their residence. The three of them returned to their residence. Seeing that there was no one around, Zhang Qiuming smiled and asked, "The Fierce brothers, have you looked through our secret room?" Zhang Meng heard this and nodded. "I've already looked through it." Zhang Qiuming heard this and smiled proudly. "How was it, the Fierce brothers? Did you find the entrance to the secret room?" Zhang Meng nodded. "I found it. The construction is really well hidden. If it was an ordinary person, they wouldn't be able to find it." "What?" Zhang Qiuming's smile froze on his face. Zhang Qiuming naturally knew about their own secret room. Zhang Qiuming naturally knew how clever the design of the entrance to the secret room was. Even if Zhang Qiuming knew where the entrance to the secret room was, every time he walked beside the cabinet and looked carefully, he couldn't find the entrance to the secret room. The cabinet and the wall were tightly sealed. Even if you stuck to the wall and looked, you wouldn't find any clues. From this point, one could see how difficult it was to find the entrance to the secret room. It was precisely because the entrance to the secret room was so tightly sealed that Zhang Qiuming dared to lead them in. Zhang Qiuming felt that if he didn't say anything, even if Fan Shouwu and Zhang Meng worked together, they still wouldn't find the secret passage. Zhang Qiuming thought that if Zhang Meng wanted to find the secret passage, he would have to tear down the entire wall to find it. Of course, even if Zhang Meng tore down the wall and found the secret passage, he wouldn't be able to enter it. The door to the secret room was made of fine iron. Even if it was an expert, it would be quite difficult to break this fine iron door. It was also because of these reasons that Zhang Qiuming dared to lead Zhang Meng to his secret room and did such a stupid thing. However, what surprised Zhang Qiuming was that Zhang Meng actually said that he found the secret room. After Zhang Qiuming recovered from his shock, he turned to look at Zhang Meng and asked tentatively, "The Fierce brothers, did you really find the entrance to our secret room?" Zhang Meng nodded. "I found it. It's built really well." Fan Shouwu, who had been watching the two from the side, was also puzzled. Just now, when the three of them went to the small living room, Fan Shouwu was also constantly observing the situation in the small living room. However, no matter how he looked around, he still couldn't find any clues. It was only when the three of them left that Fan Shouwu gave up on searching. Originally, Fan Shouwu thought that even he couldn't find the secret room, let alone Zhang Meng. He didn't expect that Zhang Meng could actually find the entrance to the secret room. However, where was the entrance to the secret room? Thinking of this, Fan Shouwu hurriedly walked to Zhang Meng's side and asked, "The Fierce brothers, did you really find the entrance to the secret room?" Zhang Meng nodded helplessly. He had already answered Zhang Qiuming, but he still had to answer Fan Shouwu. He had to answer the same question twice. It was really a headache. Fan Shouwu didn't care about Zhang Meng's headache. He just wanted to know where the entrance to the secret room that he couldn't find was, and how did Zhang Meng find it. Fan Shouwu was thinking about this question, so was Zhang Qiuming. Ever since the three of them went to the small living room, Zhang Qiuming and Fan Shouwu had been observing Zhang Meng. However, Zhang Meng's behavior was a little strange. When Zhang Meng first walked into the living room, he was indeed carefully looking around the living room. However, after looking for a while, he frowned and stopped looking. Zhang Meng's situation made Zhang Qiuming and Fan Shouwu think that Zhang Meng had already given up on searching. This was because Zhang Meng's brows were tightly knitted and he kept shaking his head. This meant that he definitely didn't find it. Chapter 109. Fan Shouwu and Zhang Qiuming originally thought that Zhang Meng had given up on the search, but they didn't expect that Zhang Meng would actually say that he had found it. Anxious, Fan Shouwu hurriedly urged, "The Fierce brothers, quickly tell us, where is the entrance to the secret chamber?" After hearing Fan Shouwu's words, Zhang Meng didn't immediately answer him. Instead, he turned to look at Zhang Qiuming. "Prince Zhang, what do you think?" After hearing Zhang Meng's question, Fan Shouwu came to a realization. This secret chamber was definitely used by Zhang Qiuming's father to store his belongings. If Zhang Meng really knew the entrance to the secret chamber and told others about it, it wouldn't be too good. Thinking of this, Fan Shouwu also knew that he was being a little rude. He hurriedly turned to look at Zhang Qiuming and smiled apologetically. To tell you the truth, at that time, I also carefully searched for a long time and didn't find the entrance to the secret chamber. I originally thought that you were lying to me and that there wasn't an entrance to the secret chamber, but I didn't expect that there really was an entrance to the secret chamber. I was a little anxious, Prince Zhang, please don't take offense. At this moment, Zhang Qiuming was also shaken to the core. When his father had built this secret chamber, although he didn't know the exact amount, he knew that it had cost a lot of money to build this secret chamber. If Zhang Meng had found the entrance, then wouldn't the huge amount of money spent on building this secret chamber have been wasted? Hearing Fan Shouwu's apologetic words, Zhang Qiuming hesitated. Should he let Zhang Meng say it, or should he not let him say it? Thinking of this, Zhang Qiuming carefully thought about the entrance to the secret chamber. He felt that such a secret chamber built so securely that it was impossible for others to find it. Zhang Qiuming turned to look at Zhang Meng and found that the expression on his face didn't seem to be fake. Zhang Qiuming looked at Fan Shouwu again. He knew that although he kept apologizing, he definitely wanted to know where the entrance to such a well-hidden secret chamber was. Thinking of this, Zhang Qiuming thought about how well the entrance to the secret chamber was hidden. In addition, Zhang Meng sat in the chair and hadn't moved since he entered the small reception room. Not only that, Zhang Meng's seat was quite a distance away from the entrance to the secret chamber. From such a distance, would Zhang Meng be able to discover such a well-hidden entrance? Zhang Qiuming thought about it and felt that it was impossible for Zhang Meng to discover the secret room's entrance. Perhaps Zhang Meng had discovered something different in another place. But what did it matter? The place Zhang Meng saw might be the furniture misplaced, or the calligraphy and painting hung slightly off. This made him suspicious and thought that he found the entrance to the secret chamber. Thinking of this possibility, the more Zhang Qiuming thought about it, the more it made sense. After all, even if Zhang Meng found something different, he didn't go close to see it. There was no way to know whether it was the entrance to the secret chamber or not. Thinking of this, Zhang Qiuming felt that Zhang Meng must have seen somewhere else to think that he found the entrance to the secret chamber. Zhang Qiuming could guarantee that if it was just from the appearance, even if an outsider looked at the outside of the cabinet, they would never see any clues. Thinking of this, Zhang Qiuming's confidence increased greatly. He made up his mind. As long as the place Zhang Meng said wasn't the real entrance, then he would admit that he was right. In this way, no one would find the real entrance to the secret chamber. Thinking of this, Zhang Qiuming smiled and nodded. This time, I brought the fierce brothers to the small living room to let him find the entrance to the secret chamber. I wanted to test his eyesight. Since the fierce brothers have found the entrance to the secret chamber, then let's listen and see if the fierce brothers are looking for the real entrance to the secret chamber. Hearing this, Fan Shouwu secretly breathed a sigh of relief. What he did just now was a little too rash. It was really inappropriate to try to find out where the treasure was hidden. However, since Zhang Qiuming took the initiative to say it, then he didn't mind listening. Zhang Meng looked at Zhang Qiuming and asked him with a smile, "Prince Zhang, is it really okay for me to say it?" Hearing this, Zhang Qiuming secretly gritted his teeth. "The fierce brothers, just say it. I won't blame you." Saying this in order to hide his guilty conscience, Zhang Qiuming laughed loudly before continuing, "The fierce brothers, just say it. Anyway, there are no outsiders here. There are only the three of us good brothers. What are you afraid of?" After hearing Zhang Qiuming's words, Fan Shouwu hurriedly expressed his opinion. "That's right. We are all good brothers. Even if we know the entrance to the secret chamber, what can we do? Don't tell me we would still covet our brother's belongings? Hearing the two's words, Zhang Meng nodded. If that's the case, then I won't hold back. Saying this, Zhang Meng's gaze was fixed on Zhang Qiuming. Prince Zhang, the entrance to the secret chamber in the small living room is at the innermost part of the small living room, behind the leftmost cabinet. Just as Zhang Meng finished speaking, Zhang Qiuming's head felt as if it had been hit by a huge hammer. It shook his head so much that it buzzed. There was only one voice echoing in his mind. How did he know? How did he know the entrance to the secret chamber? Could it be that the fierce brothers were sent by someone else? However, although Zhang Qiuming's heart was beating wildly, there was no difference on his face. Just as Zhang Qiuming was about to speak, Fan Shouwu beat him to it. The fierce brothers, did you see wrongly? The cabinet you mentioned, I saw it too, but how come I didn't see that it was the entrance to the secret chamber? On the contrary, in the middle of the wall, there was a painting that I felt was a little suspicious. It seemed more like the entrance to the secret chamber. Saying this, Fan Shouwu paused for a moment before continuing. That painting is a landscape painting. This painting is very big and should be able to cover the entrance to the secret chamber or the mechanism to enter the secret chamber. Not only that, I also realized that the painting's position is a little strange. The painting should have been hung in a flat position, but now it's a little slanted. Although the angle of cleaning isn't big, if you look closely at the corners of the painting, you can see that it has been moved. When Zhang Qiuming heard Fan Shouwu say this, his heart suddenly moved. Since Fan Shouwu said this, then he would go along with him. If they all thought that the entrance to the secret chamber was behind the painting, then this was also a good thing. At least they didn't know the real entrance to the secret chamber. Thinking this, Zhang Qiuming smiled and clapped his hands. Fan Gongzi, your observation skills are indeed amazing. Can you tell me, how did you see that the painting's position was slanted? After Fan Shouwu heard Zhang Qiuming's words, he thought that he had guessed correctly and was immediately overjoyed. He couldn't help but glance at Zhang Meng and thought to himself, my martial arts might not be as good as yours, and my strength might not be as good as yours, but in terms of observation skills, it seems that I am still better than you. Chapter 110. When Fan Shouwu heard Zhang Qiuming's question, he smiled and said, if you didn't look carefully at the painting in the small living room, he wouldn't have noticed any clues. However, if you looked carefully, you would have noticed. At this point, Fan Shouwu paused for a moment before he continued. The wall that was covered by the painting was somewhat different from the part that wasn't covered. Through the difference, I saw that the painting had moved slightly. If a painting was hung on the wall, unless you wanted to change it, no one would move it. Naturally, there wouldn't be that kind of trace. However, that painting had been moved by someone, so I guessed that behind that painting should be the entrance to the secret room, or perhaps the secret room's mechanism. Prince Zhang, am I right? After saying this, Fan Shouwu looked at Zhang Qiuming with a smile, waiting for his confirmation. After Zhang Qiuming heard Fan Shouwu's explanation, a trace of doubt arose in his heart. Fan Shouwu's words were reasonable and well-founded, as if they were real. If he didn't know where the secret room's entrance was, he might have been fooled by him. Wait, could it be that there really was a mechanism behind that painting? A mechanism that he didn't know about? Thinking of this, Zhang Qiuming decided that he would return to the small living room later and take a good look at whether there was a mechanism behind that painting. When Fan Shouwu saw that Zhang Qiuming only had his head lowered and didn't answer his question, he quickly went forward and patted him on the shoulder. Prince Zhang, am I right? When Zhang Qiuming heard this, he was stunned at first, then he nodded. Yes, Fan Gongzi's guess is correct. After saying this, Zhang Qiuming didn't say whether the back of the painting was the entrance to the secret room. He walked to Zhang Meng's side and asked with a smile, the fierce brothers, did you look at the same place as Fan Gongzi? When Zhang Meng heard this, he shook his head. No. When Fan Shouwu heard Zhang Meng's words, he couldn't help but be stunned. He didn't expect that the entrance to the secret room that Zhang Meng found wasn't behind that painting. Then where was it? Fan Shouwu frowned and quickly thought about it. Suddenly, his eyes lit up and he immediately said with a smile, "Could it be that what the fierce brothers saw was the relief on the right wall?" Relief? This time, without waiting for Zhang Meng to answer, Zhang Qiuming asked first, "Fan Gongzi, how did you know that the relief was the entrance to the secret room?" Fan Shouwu carefully thought about it and then slowly said, "When I first entered the small parlor, I was attracted by the relief. Not only was the relief beautifully carved, it was also very large, almost like a door. Not only that, there were a few protruding places on the relief that were very suspicious." When he said this, Fan Shouwu paused and glanced at Zhang Qiuming before continuing. "Young Master Zhang, I know that there are many mechanical engineers who would design the mechanism in some protruding places to open the entrance to the secret room. If I'm not wrong, those protruding places should be the switches for the secret room's entrance." When Zhang Qiuming heard this, he was stunned again and became suspicious. What was going on? Why didn't he know of any of the places that Fan Shouwu mentioned? Could it be that there were really some secret rooms that he didn't know about? Hearing Fan Shouwu speak so vividly as if it was real, even the local host, Zhang Qiuming, unknowingly believed him. After Fan Shouwu finished speaking, he turned to look at Zhang Qiuming. "Prince Zhang, you guessed correctly this time, right?" When Zhang Qiuming heard this, he nodded silently but didn't say anything. He turned his gaze back to Zhang Meng. Zhang Qiuming had already made up his mind. As long as Zhang Meng said that the entrance to the secret room was one of the two places that Fan Shouwu mentioned, he would agree without hesitation. When Zhang Meng saw them looking over, he shook his head and asked again, "Prince Zhang, the design of your secret room is really ingenious. It's very admirable. However, do you really want me to say it?" When Zhang Qiuming heard this, his expression changed, but it only lasted for a moment before returning to normal. When Zhang Meng said this, Zhang Qiuming already understood. The entrance to the secret room that Zhang Meng saw was definitely not one of the two places that Fan Shouwu mentioned. Could it be? When he thought of this, Zhang Qiuming was really nervous. When Fan Shouwu heard Zhang Meng's words, he also understood that Zhang Meng and he were not thinking of the same place. However, Fan Shouwu was very confident in his own discovery. On one hand, Fan Shouwu was confident in his own observation skills. On the other hand, the entrance to his secret room was behind a painting. Therefore, Fan Shouwu was very confident in his own guess. He didn't believe that Zhang Meng could see it more accurately than him. Although Zhang Meng and he guessed that it was not the same place, before the answer was revealed, no one knew who guessed correctly. When he thought of this, Fan Shouwu quickly walked to Zhang Meng's side and said with a smile, "The fierce brothers, tell us what you see, and then we'll let Prince Zhang tell us the answer together. Let's see who's the right one." Zhang Meng smiled and shook his head. "I just said that it's the cabinet in front of the leftmost wall. The entrance to the secret room is behind that cabinet." When Fan Shouwu heard this, he smiled and waved his hand. "That's impossible. That cabinet is tightly attached to the wall. If the entrance to the secret room is behind that cabinet, then how can it be opened? Even if it can be opened, when the cabinet and the wall are closed, can it be closed so tightly that no one can see any clues?" When Zhang Meng heard Fan Shouwu's words, he smiled and shook his head. "Fan Gongzi, you guessed that painting and the wall with the relief sculpture. I guessed that cabinet. Let's let Prince Zhang reveal who's right." After saying this, Zhang Meng turned to look at Zhang Qiuming. When Fan Shouwu heard this, he hurriedly turned to Zhang Qiuming and urged, "Prince Zhang, who's right? Tell us." At this moment, Zhang Qiuming finally understood what was going on. Based on Fan Shouwu's words, he definitely didn't find the entrance to the secret room. However, Zhang Meng's identification of the entrance to the secret room was real. How should he answer this? He agreed that Zhang Meng was right. The entrance to the secret room was behind that cabinet. However, was this really a good thing to do? Was it really appropriate to tell others about the entrance to the secret room in his own house? However, if he agreed that Fan Shouwu was right and that the entrance to the secret room was behind that painting or the wall with the relief sculpture, what if Zhang Meng didn't agree? If Zhang Meng didn't agree and believed that the entrance to the secret room was behind the cabinet, wouldn't he be deceiving Fan Shouwu if he went to confirm it? When that time came, they couldn't even be friends anymore. Zhang Qiuming really had a headache. After thinking about it, he finally decided to tell the truth. Since it was already like this, there was really no other way. Chapter 111. Thinking of this, Zhang Qiuming looked at Fan Shouwu and said with a smile, "Fan Gongzi, you guessed wrong. The two places you mentioned are not the entrance to the secret room." When Fan Shouwu heard this, the confident smile on his face disappeared. After a moment, he asked doubtfully, "Could it be that the fierce brothers are right?" When Zhang Qiuming heard Fan Shouwu's words, he hesitated for a moment before nodding and saying frankly, "That's right. The fierce brothers are right. The real entrance to the secret room is behind that cabinet." When Fan Shouwu heard this, he was even more doubtful. "But from the outside, I can't see it at all. Could it be that the entrance to the secret room is so cleverly designed?" Zhang Qiuming nodded. "Indeed. I can only tell you that the entrance to the secret room is indeed behind that cabinet. As for how to open it, forgive me for not being able to tell you." When Fan Shouwu heard this, he nodded. For Zhang Qiuming to say this, it was already very generous. If it was someone else, they probably wouldn't even say it. Zhang Meng suddenly said, "Actually, even if you know the entrance to the secret room, it's useless. You can't go in. That secret room is incomparably sturdy. It doesn't mean that you can enter the secret room as long as you know the way to open the mechanism." When Zhang Qiuming heard this, he was suddenly shocked. Could it be that Zhang Meng had already seen through the mechanism? When he thought of this, Zhang Qiuming secretly shook his head. Impossible, absolutely impossible. If Zhang Meng could see everything clearly from such a far distance, then wouldn't it mean that he was more powerful than the people from Tianjin Gate? This was absolutely impossible. Zhang Meng didn't want to talk about this topic anymore. After all, it wasn't a good thing for the three of them to study other people's secret rooms here. It was better not to mention this matter again. Thinking up to this point, Zhang Meng smiled and said, "Through your family's secret chamber, I feel that Yi Xian, who built your secret chamber, should be quite skilled. I've decided to let Yi Xian complete the construction of our auction house." At this point, Zhang Meng paused for a moment before continuing, "As for inviting Yi Xian, we will have to rely on Prince Zhang's help." Upon hearing this, Zhang Qiuming smiled and nodded. "Then," he said seriously, "the fierce brothers, you don't have to be so polite. To be honest, if it weren't for the fierce brothers, Fan Gongzi and I wouldn't have been able to make it back. Between us brothers, there's no need to be so polite." Upon hearing this, Zhang Meng hurriedly cupped his fists and said, "All right then, I'll have to trouble Prince Zhang with this matter." Zhang Qiuming nodded. "I'll send someone to invite Yi Xian. The fierce brothers just have to wait for the good news." Zhang Meng said, "Prince Zhang, how long will it take to invite Yi Xian?" Zhang Qiuming thought for a moment before replying, "If there are no accidents, 7 days should be enough." Zhang Meng nodded. "All right then, I'll come back in 7 days." After he finished speaking, Zhang Meng stood up and prepared to take his leave. At this moment, footsteps came from outside the door. At the same time, Xiao Yu's voice came from outside. "Brother, are you there?" Upon hearing this voice, Zhang Qiuming smiled bitterly and shook his head. He had already guessed it. As long as Xiao Yu knew that he had a black feather cloak, she would definitely come and ask for it. "Come in, I'm at home." Following Zhang Qiuming's words, Xiao Yu quickly walked in. Although Xiao Yu came to look for her brother, after entering the room, her gaze swept around the room. In the end, her gaze stopped on Zhang Meng, and a smile immediately appeared on her face. So Prince Zhang is also here. Zhang Meng nodded. Miss Xiao Yu. Xiao Yu smiled as she walked in front of Zhang Meng. Prince Zhang, could it be that you really obtained my brother's Eagle of Nightmare's feather? Zhang Meng nodded. Yes. Upon hearing that, Xiao Yu circled around Zhang Meng and shook her head. But the Eagle of Nightmare is so powerful, can you really defeat it? Zhang Meng looked at Xiao Yu and suddenly smiled. Miss Xiao Yu, do you want a black feather cloak? Upon hearing that, Xiao Yu was stunned for a moment. Following that, she hurriedly nodded. Yes, do you have more? Zhang Meng nodded. I can give Miss Xiao Yu a black feather cloak. But I have a condition. As long as you can agree to my condition, I will definitely give you a black feather cloak. Upon hearing Zhang Meng's words, a trace of vigilance surfaced in Xiao Yu's eyes as she asked, What condition, can you tell me first? Zhang Meng nodded. 20,000 gold coins for a black feather cloak. As long as Miss Xiao Yu sells 10 of them, I will immediately give Miss Xiao Yu a black feather cloak. Miss Xiao Yu, is this condition simple or not? Upon hearing Zhang Meng's words, a trace of disbelief surfaced on Xiao Yu's face. After a long while, she probed. Do you have so many black feather cloaks? You're not lying to me, right? Zhang Meng shook his head. I keep my word and will definitely not lie to you. As long as you sell 10 black feather cloaks, I will definitely give one to Miss Xiao Yu. However, the selling price of each item cannot be less than 20,000 gold coins. This time, without waiting for Xiao Yu to reply, Fan Shouwu asked first. The Fierce Brothers, do you really have so many black feather cloaks? Zhang Meng nodded. There will only be more, not less. Upon hearing this, Fan Shouwu could not help but gasp. This is too ridiculous. For a black feather cloak, others would have to fight to the death and risk half their lives to obtain it. However, Zhang Meng had so many black feather cloaks. Could it be that the nightmare eagles were raised in his backyard? However, he had no choice but to believe in such a ridiculous matter. After all, the nightmare eagle feathers in his and Zhang Qiuming's hands were obtained by Zhang Meng. In just a short amount of time, he managed to obtain 60 nightmare eagle feathers. His speed was so fast that it was no different from being raised at home. It was as if he had just returned home and brought them here. Thinking of this, Fan Shouwu could not care less. He hurriedly stepped forward and grabbed Zhang Meng. The Fierce Brothers, since you have so many black feather cloaks, why don't you let me sell them for you? When the time comes, I will sell 10 black feather cloaks and you will give me one. The Fierce Brothers, what do you think? After hearing Fan Shouwu's words, Zhang Meng nodded. He had the nightmare eagle feathers. It did not matter who would sell them for him. The key was to sell them for a good price. Thinking of this, Zhang Meng smiled and asked, 20,000 gold coins for one, that should not be a problem, right? Upon hearing this, Fan Shouwu hurriedly nodded. No problem, definitely no problem. Before Fan Shouwu could finish, he was interrupted by Xiao Yu. Big brother Fan, just now, the person Prince Zhang was looking for was clearly me. Upon saying this, Xiao Yu turned to look at Zhang Meng. Chapter 112. Xiao Yu turned to look at Zhang Meng and said with a smile, Zhang de Gu, ignore him. If I can help you sell 10 black feather cloaks, will you really give me a black feather cloak? Zhang Meng nodded and replied with a smile, Don't worry, I will keep my word. After Xiao Yu heard Zhang Meng's words, she turned to look at Fan Shouwu and raised her head proudly. Zhang de Gu, then it's a deal. When do we start? Zhang Meng thought for a moment, then turned to look at Fan Shouwu and asked, If you want to make a black feather cloak, where do you need to find a craftsman? Fan Shouwu heard this and said with a smile, To make a black feather cloak, you also need a skilled craftsman. At this point, Fan Shouwu paused before continuing, Such a craftsman can only be found in the South region. South region? After Zhang Meng heard Fan Shouwu's words, he nodded and then asked, "Can you invite a craftsman here?" Hearing this, Fan Shouwu shook his head. "I'm afraid that's not possible. The craftsmen who can make such a high-grade item like the black feather cloak are all from the sect. It's not that easy for them to come out privately." Zhang Meng was stunned when he heard this. After a while, he asked tentatively, "Is it very difficult to sew a black feather cloak?" Fan Shouwu nodded. "It's extremely difficult. To make a black feather cloak, not only do you have to connect them together, but you also have to connect the fire attribute of the black feather cloak together. You can't lose a single bit. Otherwise, the feathers of the nightmare eagle will lose the fire attribute and become useless, becoming ordinary feathers." Zhang Meng heard this and nodded. Although he still didn't quite understand, from what Fan Shouwu said, it seemed to be quite powerful. Zhang Meng thought for a moment before asking, "Why can't these craftsmen come out privately, but Yi Xian from the Tianji sect can come out? Is there something different about them?" After hearing Zhang Meng's words, Zhang Qiuming didn't wait for Fan Shouwu to answer before he smiled and said, "The fierce brothers, you're wrong. Even if I want to invite Yi Xian, he has to report to the sect first. After the sect gives permission, Yi Xian will come here. Only then will he come here." When Zhang Meng heard this, he suddenly realized that he was wrong. Since there was still a need to report to the sect, Zhang Meng thought for a moment before looking at Zhang Qiuming and saying, "Then let's invite Prince Zhang to do this together. When we invite Yi Xian here, we'll also invite the craftsmen who make the black feather cloak. What do you think?" After hearing Zhang Meng's words, Zhang Qiuming nodded. Naturally, he wouldn't personally do this kind of thing. He would just write an extra letter for his subordinates to send. There wasn't much difference between inviting 1 or 2 craftsmen. Xiao Yu, who had been standing by the side, was a little disappointed when she heard that she had to make the black feather cloak on the spot. She rolled her eyes and suddenly said to Zhang Meng, "Prince Zhang, why don't you take out 2 samples first, and then I can sell them?" When Zhang Meng heard this, he felt that Xiao Yu's words were quite reasonable. However, he didn't have the black feather cloak in his hands. What should he do? Thinking of this, Zhang Meng turned his gaze to Zhang Qiuming and asked, "Prince Zhang, is your black feather cloak ready?" Zhang Qiuming shook his head with a wry smile. "It's not that fast. We've only been back for 2 or 3 days. How can it be ready so quickly? I originally planned to wait for Fan Gongzi to return and go to Nanjun with him. At that time, I'll ask someone to make the black feather cloak." After hearing Zhang Qiuming's words, Zhang Meng turned to look at Xiao Yu and spread his hands. "Then there's nothing we can do. We don't have the black feather cloak now. We can only talk about this matter in the future." Xiao Yu nodded in disappointment. "So that's the only way?" Seeing the disappointed Xiao Yu, Zhang Meng suddenly remembered something. He hurriedly asked, "Miss Xiao Yu, think about it for me. What else is valuable but not easy to get?" Xiao Yu was stunned when she heard this. She did not understand what Zhang Meng meant. She hesitated and asked, "Zhang de Gu, what do you mean? What valuable things?" Zhang Meng knew that he might not have made it clear, so he explained, "I'm talking about the kind of things that everyone likes but can't get, or there are very few of them and it's very difficult to get them." "I see." After Xiao Yu heard Zhang Meng's words, she frowned and began to think. After a while, she suddenly clapped her hand. "I remember. Zhang de Gu, do you know about whitefish scales?" Zhang Meng shook his head. "I don't know. What are whitefish scales? What are they used for?" This time, without waiting for Xiao Yu to answer, Fan Shouwu had already said, "The fierce brothers, you don't even know what white fish scales are." After Zhang Meng heard Fan Shouwu's question, he shook his head doubtfully. "I don't know. Why should I know what white fish scales are?" Fan Shouwu saw this and nodded with a smile. It seems that the fierce brothers don't have a woman they like, so they didn't think about it. Zhang Meng heard this and was even more puzzled. Fan Gongzi, if you have anything to say, just say it. I really don't know what white fish scales are. Fan Shouwu saw that Zhang Meng really didn't know, so he said with a smile, white fish scales, as the name implies, are the scales on the white fish. These scales are not big, about the size of a human face, but the function of these scales is to stick on the face and make the skin whiter. Of course, it can also make it better. After Zhang Meng heard Fan Shouwu's words, he suddenly realized. He thought to himself, isn't this a mask? It's just a change of name. It's naturally formed, not made. Thinking of the mask, Zhang Meng was a little puzzled. He had seen fish scales before, and each one was very strong. Would it be good to stick something like this on the face? Thinking of this, Zhang Meng asked with some doubts, white fish scales are the scales on the white fish. Then, what effect can such a hard scale have on the face? After Fan Shouwu heard Zhang Meng's words, he couldn't help but laugh. He patted Zhang Meng's shoulder and explained, the fierce brothers, white fish scales are not what you think. The reason why we use white fish scales is because white fish scales are very soft. Even if you put it on the face, it won't show the effect you described. In addition, the white fish scales are really effective. After you stick them on, you can see the effect after a month. However, this kind of white fish scales are very expensive, so even if ordinary people have heard of it, they probably can't afford it. Zhang Qiuming heard Fan Shouwu's words and said with a smile, Fan Gongzi, you're wrong. I'm afraid it's not just ordinary people who can't afford it. It should be said that in this world, how many people can afford it? Fan Shouwu nodded. That's true. The scales of whitefish are expensive. There are only a few people in the world who can afford to use the scales of whitefish. I was wrong about that. Chapter 113. After listening to Fan Shouwu's words, Zhang Meng was overjoyed. Fan Gongzi, you mean, the scales of this kind of whitefish are very expensive. Fan Shouwu nodded. Not only is it very expensive, but it is also very rare, almost to the point where there is a price but no supply. Zhang Meng heard this and was a little puzzled. Is this kind of fish very rare? Fan Shouwu nodded. To reach the point where there is no loss, it is not just because the number of white fish is small, but there are other reasons. Speaking of this, Fan Shouwu's tone paused before continuing. White fish is just its abbreviation. The full name of white fish is berserk white spear fish. White fish is about 10 meters long, and at the front of its body, there is a 1 meter long spike as hard as iron. Usually, this kind of fish is mild-tempered and basically will not attack humans. However, when the white fish is angry, it immediately changes. When the white fish charges with all its strength, it can penetrate a ship, almost to the point of being indestructible. In addition, it can launch all the scales on its body in an instant, forming a large range of damage, so it is useless to besiege it with many people. Zhang Meng heard this and shook his head. This is nothing, it should not be difficult to hunt it down at this level. Fan Shouwu shook his head. It's not like that, I haven't finished speaking yet. White fish not only have strong attacks, but its speed is also very fast. Even if you surround it, it will disappear without a trace in the blink of an eye. Speaking of this, Fan Shouwu turned to look at Zhang Meng and said with a smile, the fierce brothers, don't think about killing it directly and then getting the scales of the white fish, this is impossible. It is strange to say that these white fish, as long as they are killed, the scales on their body will immediately become hard, no different from the scales on the body of ordinary fish. In this way, it will lose its effect. Therefore, if we don't kill the white fish, we have to obtain its scales. Only then will the scales be useful. After Zhang Meng heard Fan Shouwu's words, he asked doubtfully, but even so, it's not difficult to get the scales on the white fish. Didn't you say that the white fish can shoot all the scales on its body in an instant? After it shoots the scales, won't we get the scales? Fan Shou shook his head with a smile. That's impossible. When white fishes shoot out their scales, all their scales will become as hard as iron. Even if you get those scales, they'll be as hard as iron. They'll have no effect at all. When Zhang Meng heard this, he was even more puzzled. If that doesn't work, then how do I get these scales to be effective? Fan Shou nodded. This is the most difficult part because no one knows when the scales on the white fish will be effective, so it's difficult to get them. After Fan Shou finished speaking, Zhang Qiuming also said, in fact, not everyone doesn't know when they can get the effective scales. I believe that there should be some people who know, but this is their way of making money. They definitely won't tell others because this is their secret. Zhang Meng heard this and nodded. Indeed, even if those who know how to get the effective scales must have spent a lot of effort and manpower to get the secret, they will certainly not easily tell others because they still rely on this matter to make money. At this moment, Fan Shou suddenly said again, by the way, there is one more thing I haven't said. Zhang Meng heard this and nodded. Fan Gongzi, please explain. Fan Shou said. The white fish has a most powerful ability, which is also their life-saving ability. Zhang Meng heard this and hurriedly asked, what is it? Fan Shou said with a dignified expression, lightning, the white fish can launch a lightning attack. Of course, the lightning attack launched by the white fish is not a large-scale lightning attack like the one launched in the sky, but a beam of lightning. When someone attacks the white fish, it will often launch this lightning attack to attack the opponent. The intensity of this lightning attack is very high. If an ordinary person is hit by this beam of lightning, they will die on the spot. Even a person with strong martial arts will be numb for a while before they can recover. Fan Shou said this and paused for a moment. He glanced at Zhang Meng and continued, when encountering an opponent, the white fish will first launch a lightning attack, and then use its invincible thorn to give the enemy a fatal blow. Speaking of this, Fan Shou sighed, the most important thing is that these white fishes are all fishes that live in groups. Their small shoals will have a dozen or so fishes gathered together, and the large ones will probably have hundreds of fishes gathered together, or even more. Think about it, if hundreds of white fish launch a lightning attack at you, with that kind of power, I'm afraid anyone can escape from this terrifying lightning attack. After Zhang Meng heard Fan Shou's words, he nodded. If what Fan Shou said is true, white fish are fish that live in groups, then, not to mention their physical attack, their lightning attack is absolutely powerful. Under the lightning attack of hundreds of white fish, there are very few people who can escape unscathed. Thinking of this, Zhang Meng completely believed Fan Shou's words. According to the meaning of Fan Shou's words, this kind of white fish scale is so difficult to get, the price must be very expensive. Seeing Zhang Meng lowering his head and thinking there, Fan Shou smiled and patted him on the shoulder. The fierce brothers, white fish are not so easy to hunt. What's more, even if you can hunt white fish, it's hard to say whether their scales have any effect. Instead of spending so much effort to get some useless scales, I think it's better to think of something else to do. After Zhang Qiuming listened to Fan Shou's words, he also nodded. Yes, if you want to get the white fish scale, the difficulty is almost greater than getting the nightmare eagle's feather. Moreover, after getting it, no one knows whether it has any effect. So, I think it's better to get the nightmare eagle's feather. After Xiao Yu listened to the words of several people, her heart was pounding. She only heard people say that the effect of white fish scales was very good. After almost a month, it could change a person's image. Therefore, when Zhang Meng asked her what was good to sell, Xiao Yu thought of white fish scales. To be honest, Xiao Yu only heard about it. As for using it, she could only think about it. Although her father was the city lord, white fish scales were so rare that even the city lord couldn't get them so easily. What's more, every time white fish scales appeared, it would be crazily fought for. Chapter 114. White fish scales are a good thing, there is no doubt about this. However, it is very difficult to get effective white fish scales. Therefore, the price of white fish scales is high, almost to the point where there is no market. It can be said that if anyone has a way to get a large number of white fish scales, they will immediately use these white fish scales to exchange for a lot of wealth. Hearing everyone say this, Zhang Meng thought for a moment and asked, after getting these white fish scales, there should be no need to process them. Fan Shou shook his head. No, because as long as it is a fish, there will be a fishy smell. If it is not processed, very few people will be able to stand this fishy smell. What's more, the people who use white fish scales are all women, they can't stand it. Therefore, even if you have these white fish scales, they must be processed before they can be sold. After Zhang Meng heard Fan Shou's introduction, he asked doubtfully, "What will it be processed into?" Fan Shou smiled. "Of course, it will be to get rid of the fishy smell." Zhang Meng said, "That's it, just to get rid of the fishy smell?" Fan Shou nodded. "That's it, just to get rid of the fishy smell, it can be sold." Zhang Meng nodded and did not say anything, but in his heart, he thought that if these white fish scales were processed into various fragrances, presumably, the price should be higher. After everyone finished speaking, Xiao Yu impatiently asked, "Zhang Degu, do you have white fish scales?" Zhang Meng heard this, smiled and nodded, confidently said, "No problem, as long as there is something in this world, I can get it." Xiao Yu was stunned when she heard this. "Really?" Zhang Meng nodded. "Really, I won't lie to you." Fan Shou saw that Zhang Meng was so confident and couldn't help but say, "The fierce brothers, although your martial arts are strong, do you know where to find white fish?" Zhang Meng was stunned. Yes, no matter how powerful he was, he didn't even know where the white fish were. How could he hunt? Thinking of this, Zhang Meng hurriedly asked, "Fan Gongzi, do you know where whitefish can be found?" Fan Shou shook his head. "I don't know, but I know someone who knows." When Zhang Meng heard this, he was overjoyed and hurriedly asked, "Who is it? Who knows where Baiyu is?" Fan Shou smiled and said, "Of course it's those who have hunted whitefish before. I think they must know where to find whitefish." Zhang Meng nodded, but after thinking about it again, these people probably wouldn't say anything about such a profitable business. "Fan Gongzi, will the people who killed Baiyu give us such an important clue?" Fan Shou shook his head. "I don't think so. After all, that's what they rely on to survive." Zhang Meng was stunned when he heard this. Since they won't tell us where whitefish is, what's the use? Fan Shou smiled and shook his head. "The fierce brothers, although they won't tell us where whitefish is, can't we secretly check it out?" Zhang Qiuming also smiled and said, "Yes, when they go to hunt whitefish, we will secretly follow them. Naturally, we will know where they are going." After Zhang Meng listened to the two's words, he nodded. "It seems that this is the only way. However, who are the people you are talking about?" Fan Shou smiled and said, "To be precise, they are not a person, but a gang. They are called the Sharks." After listening to Fan Shou's words, Zhang Meng's heart suddenly moved and he asked, "Are the whitefish you are talking about in the sea?" Fan Shou nodded. "Yes, whitefish that are more than 10 meters long can still live in the river. What's more, these whitefish are fish that live in group. Think about it, what kind of river can accommodate so many and such big whitefish?" Zhang Meng nodded. It was true. Such big fish could only be found in the sea. Xiao Yu, who was standing aside and listening to them, said, "Zhang Degu, when are you going to hunt these whitefish?" Zhang Meng thought about it. There were a lot of things to do now. First of all, the construction work of the auction house was the most important. If he wanted to build an auction house, he needed someone to build it. Therefore, the first thing he needed to do was to ask Yi Xian to build an auction house for him. Secondly, he needed to find someone to sew the black feather cloak for him as soon as possible, and then quickly sell it for some gold coins. After all, the cost of building an auction house should be huge. In Zhang Meng's opinion, the 10,000 gold coins alone should be far from enough. Therefore, he needed to earn more gold coins in a short period of time to build his own auction house. Finally, he could hunt these whitefish and obtain these expensive whitefish scales. This was Zhang Meng's temporary plan. Things had to be done step by step. It was useless to be anxious. After all, Zhang Meng did not have any connections. These things, he needed to rely on Fan Shouwu and Zhang Qiuming to help. Naturally, he could not be anxious about asking others for help. Thinking of this, Zhang Meng looked at Zhang Qiuming and said with a smile, "Now, the most important thing is to build the auction house first. Therefore, I ask Prince Zhang to help me invite Yi Xian as soon as possible. The auction house needs to be started as soon as possible." Speaking of this, Zhang Meng paused before continuing, "Of course, we also need to find someone to sew the black feather cloak as soon as possible. I should be looking for the nightmare eagle's feathers tomorrow. I should be able to bring back a large number of nightmare eagle's feathers in the next 2 days. Therefore, I ask Prince Zhang to find the relevant people as soon as possible so that we can carry out our plan as soon as possible." Zhang Qiuming heard this and nodded. "The fierce brothers, don't worry. I'll find someone to invite people from the South County." After Zhang Meng heard Zhang Qiuming's words, he nodded. "Okay, I won't disturb you anymore. I'll go back now and prepare to find the nightmare eagle's feathers." While speaking, Zhang Meng cupped his fists at Zhang Qiuming and Fan Shouwu. "Goodbye." After speaking, Zhang Meng turned and left. After leaving the city lord's mansion, Zhang Meng did not delay and directly walked in the direction of his village. Inside the city lord's mansion, after Fan Shouwu and Zhang Qiuming sent Zhang Meng off, they returned to their residence. Just as the two of them returned to their room, Zhang Qiuming asked someone to prepare fragrant tea. The two of them then sat opposite each other. The two of them were silent for a while before Zhang Qiuming spoke first. "Fan Gongzi, do you think what the fierce brothers said was true or false?" Fan Shouwu smiled. "I don't know either. However, looking at the way the fierce brothers spoke, it didn't seem like they were lying." Zhang Qiuming heard this and nodded. Looking at the way the fierce brothers acted, it didn't seem like they were lying. However, the things they said were hard to believe. Fan Shouwu nodded. "I think so too. The fierce brothers are just people from a small village. Do they really have such great ability?" Chapter 115. After hearing Fan Shouwu's words, Zhang Qiuming nodded in agreement. "Let's not talk about anything else. Let's just talk about the feathers of the nightmare eagle." At this point, Zhang Qiuming looked deeply at Fan Shouwu and asked with some doubt. "The fierce brothers said that they have 10 black feather cloak feathers. What do you think about this?" Fan Shouwu heard this and asked curiously, "Could it be that the fierce brothers killed the nightmare eagle last time? In other words, he stored the feathers of the nightmare eagle." After hearing Fan Shouwu's words, Zhang Qiuming nodded and said, "But can the fierce brothers really kill the nightmare eagle?" At this point, Zhang Qiuming paused and carefully recalled the appearance of the nightmare eagle before continuing. "Even if the fierce brothers are strong, if the nightmare eagle flies in the air, how can they deal with it? Plus, the nightmare eagle can breathe fire. Could it be that the fierce brothers aren't afraid of being burned by fire?" Fan Shouwu thought for a while before answering, "I'm also curious about this. Think about it, you've been to the top of the Red Mountain. The temperature there is unbearably high, and we're still at the edge of the mountain. I think that the further we go, the higher the temperature will be. More importantly, from the looks of it, the nightmare eagle's residence must be in the middle of the mountain." Zhang Qiuming nodded. "Yes, we're only at the edge of the mountain, and it's already unbearable. The middle of the mountain is very far from the edge of the mountain. I think, based on the distance, the temperature in the middle of the mountain is probably enough to melt iron and stone. How did the fierce brothers pass through it?" Fan Shouwu nodded. "That's what I'm curious about. Zhang Qiuming said. I've heard people say that in the Magic Empire, they have fireproof equipment. However, the Fierce Brothers didn't wear any equipment. How strange. Fan Shouwu said, I've heard that there's a type of charm that can resist the burning of flames. Could it be that the Fierce Brothers have something like that? Zhang Qiuming shook his head. I don't think so. I've heard of the talisman you mentioned before. However, I heard that the talisman has a time limit. Can't be used for a long time. At this point, Zhang Qiuming paused. He recalled the situation on the Red Mountain Peak that day and continued. Fan Gongzi, think about it carefully. Back then, at the Red Mountain Peak, he was the first one to recall the situation that day. Fan Shouwu was startled at first. Then, he lowered his head and recalled the situation that day. After a while, he raised his head and spoke slowly. No, he didn't sweat that day. Although I wasn't paying attention to him, I'm sure that the Fierce Brothers didn't sweat at all that day. Not only that, even going up and down the mountain peak was extremely easy for him, unlike us who were scared witless. Zhang Qiuming nodded. That's true. That day, the Fierce Brothers didn't sweat at all. During the entire search process, he was also the most relaxed person. It could be said that he wasn't affected by the high temperature at the top of the mountain. At this point, the room fell into silence again. The two of them were seriously recalling everything that happened that day. After a while, Zhang Qiuming spoke slowly. From all the signs, the temperature at the top of the mountain might have been terrifying for us. However, the Fierce Brothers acted as if nothing had happened, as if they didn't feel anything. At this point, Zhang Qiuming paused. He raised his head and looked at Fan Shouwu. Could it be that the Fierce Brothers could really withstand the high temperature there? Fan Shouwu nodded. Other than that, there's no other explanation. Zhang Qiuming said, This is the only explanation that can explain how the Fierce Brothers were able to hunt down the Nightmare Eagle. Fan Shouwu silently nodded after hearing Zhang Qiuming's words. The two of them guessed that the temperature at the top of the Red Mountain Peak must have been quite high. Based on the closer distance to the top of the mountain, the temperature might have been as high as the furnace in the blacksmith's furnace. The Fierce Brothers were actually able to hunt down the Nightmare Eagle under such high temperatures. Thinking of this, Zhang Qiuming couldn't help but ask, Fan Gongzi, do you think the temperature at the top of the mountain will drop? Fan Shouwu was startled when he heard this, then shook his head. Impossible. If I'm not wrong, the reason why the temperature at the top of the mountain is so high seems to be because of the heat coming from the middle of the mountain, causing the entire mountain to be incomparably hot. Zhang Qiuming muttered doubtfully, could it be that there's really someone who can withstand such high temperatures? Fan Shouwu heard Zhang Qiuming's muttering, but he didn't answer because he had the same doubts in his heart. Could there really be someone who could survive under such high temperatures that could melt metal and refine stone? After a while, Fan Shouwu slowly said, This Zhang Meng is really a strange person. When I mentioned the name Shark Pack to him, he didn't even have the slightest bit of fear. It's really strange. Zhang Qiuming also nodded. It's really strange. This is the first time I've seen someone so calm after hearing the name Shark Pack. The Shark Pack was actually a group of pirates. This group of pirates weren't ordinary pirates. Not only were they incomparably savage, but they were also highly skilled in martial arts. Especially the boss of the Shark Pack, he was the strongest of the strong. Any merchant ship that heard the name Shark Pack would definitely tremble in fear. The name Shark Pack wasn't a bluff, but a real battle. Everyone had only heard of the name Shark Pack, but not many people had seen the true face of the Shark Pack. This was because those who had seen their true face had already been killed by them. Every time before going out to sea, merchants would pray that they wouldn't meet the Shark Pack. This was because if they met the Shark Pack, they definitely wouldn't be able to come back alive. Such a terrifying gang, but Zhang Meng didn't have the slightest bit of fear after hearing it. This was really too hard to believe. Zhang Qiuming said hesitantly, "Could it be that the fierce brothers haven't heard of the name Shark Pack?" Fan Shouwu heard this, thought for a while, and shook his head. Logically speaking, that shouldn't be the case. The Shark Pack's name is so famous, there shouldn't be anyone who hasn't heard of their name. Zhang Qiuming also nodded. Yeah, it's really strange. Fan Shouwu's eyes suddenly lit up. Unless the fierce brothers aren't afraid of the Shark Pack. That's why they aren't afraid. Zhang Qiuming nodded. It's also very possible. The fierce brothers aren't even afraid of the Nightmare Eagle, so it makes sense that they wouldn't be afraid of the Shark Pack. Fan Shouwu sighed. Zhang Meng is really a strange person. Chapter 116. Zhang Meng returned to Mount Xuanyu. In the next few days, he began to plan the terrain of Mount Xuanyu. In the middle of the valley, he naturally had to build an extremely large auction house. In the 4 weeks surrounding the auction house, he would build a few hotels and inns. According to Zhang Meng's estimation, there would not be many people coming to the auction house on Mount Xuanyu in the short term. However, as time passed, it would naturally be overcrowded. Therefore, all kinds of restaurants and inns had to be built first to prevent people from having nowhere to stay when they came. In addition, there were also the residences in the valley. In Zhang Meng's opinion, the 100 or so people in the valley were still too few. They still needed to recruit a lot of people to fill up the entire valley. With more people, there would naturally be more places to stay. In addition, it was impossible to only have buildings. There would also be some decorations. In short, if he wanted to build Mount Xuanyu well, he would need an enormous amount of funds. Seeing that there were so many things to build, Zhang Meng felt a headache coming on. Zhang Meng decided that it was better to find a professional to help him with this headache. During this period, Zhang Meng was not the only one who was busy. The chiefs of the mountain stronghold were also very busy. Every day they would purchase all kinds of construction materials from the association. The young men in the mountain stronghold would drive the carriages back to transport them. Of course, under Zhang Meng's insistence, the mountain stronghold added 10 more carriages to be used to transport goods. In the blink of an eye, 5 days had passed. Zhang Meng calculated for a while and decided to go to Qingmu City to take a look. According to the time he had agreed with Zhang Qiuming, Yi Xian should be here today. In addition, the tailor he had asked him to find should also be here. Thinking of this, Zhang Meng decided to go and take a look today. Soon, Zhang Meng arrived at the Zhang mansion again. This time, the servants of the Zhang mansion already knew Zhang Meng. Naturally, they had gone to inform him early. As soon as Zhang Meng entered the house, he saw Zhang Qiuming looking at him with an ugly expression. He seemed to want to say something, but stopped himself. Zhang Meng looked around. There was only Zhang Qiuming in the room. Fan Shouwu had already gone home. But that's not right. Where's Yi Xian? What about the senior tailor? Where are these people? Prince Zhang, where is the person I'm looking for? When Zhang Qiuming heard this, he shook his head and said dejectedly, No, I didn't invite a single one. Zhang Meng was stunned when he heard this. He asked subconsciously, Why? Didn't you invite anyone? Zhang Qiuming nodded. Our luck isn't good. These 2 people are in trouble. I'm afraid they won't be able to come. Troublesome. When Zhang Meng heard this, he was stunned again. What kind of trouble did they encounter? Why won't they be able to come? Zhang Qiuming smiled bitterly and shook his head. He reached out and grabbed Zhang Meng's arm. The fierce brothers, sit down first. Let's talk about this slowly. Zhang Qiuming pulled Zhang Meng to sit down as he ordered the servant girl beside him. Go and prepare some fragrant tea. The servant girl responded and turned to leave the room. After they were seated, Zhang Meng asked, Prince Zhang, what happened? Why can't they come? After Zhang Qiuming sat down, he slowly said, This time, our luck is really bad. Logically speaking, the matter of the Tianji sect should be settled as long as I ask Father to write a letter and send it over. At this point, Zhang Qiuming smiled bitterly again and continued, "This time, Yi Xian has encountered trouble. Not only can he not come, but I'm afraid he won't be able to come in the future." After Zhang Meng heard Zhang Qiuming's words, he could not help but ask, "What trouble? What trouble did Yi Xian encounter?" When Zhang Qiuming heard this, he looked around and lowered his voice. "The whole story of this matter is a secret of the Tianji sect. Naturally, we don't know. However, I heard from the disciples of the Tianji sect that Yi Xian stole a treasure of the Tianji sect but refused to admit it. Until now, he is still locked up by the Tianji sect." Zhang Meng nodded when he heard this. "What treasure did Yi Xian steal?" Zhang Qiuming shook his head. "No one knows. I heard that the treasure is one of the most precious treasures of the Tianji sect. It was also sent to the South County branch a few days ago." Zhang Meng nodded. "Since Yi Xian stole something, it's understandable that he can't come. Then, what's the matter with the other person? Why can't she come?" When Zhang Qiuming heard this, he sighed again. "Our luck is really bad. The person I want to invite this time is Lu Ling from Kikiaman. Originally, there shouldn't be a big problem and we could definitely invite her. However, the Seven Apertures sect encountered a big problem." At this point, Zhang Qiuming turned to look at Zhang Meng and asked, "The Fierce Brothers, do you know about Tiangongmen?" Zhang Meng shook his head. "No." Zhang Qiuming was stunned when he heard this. "The Fierce Brothers, don't you know about Tiangongmen?" Zhang Meng shook his head again. "I don't know. What are Tiangongmen and what do they do?" Zhang Qiuming saw that Zhang Meng really didn't know, so he explained, "Tiangongmen are a large sect that manufactures equipment. They have countless disciples and can be considered a rather powerful sect." Zhang Meng nodded when he heard this. "Tiangongmen are a sect that manufactures equipment." Zhang Qiuming nodded as well. "That's right. They manufacture all kinds of equipment." After hearing Zhang Qiuming's explanation, Zhang Meng asked doubtfully, "What does the person I want to invite have to do with the Tiangongmen? Don't tell me they won't let him come?" Zhang Qiuming shook his head. "That's not the case. Kikiaman and Tiangongmen are both sects that manufacture equipment. The two sects have been enemies for a long time. The Tiangongmen were powerful while Kikiaman was weak. Because of this, the Tiangongmen always wanted to annex Kikiaman. However, although Kikiaman was weak, it was unwilling to be annexed by the Tiangongmen. Therefore, the two sides began to fight openly and covertly. Of course, most of the fights were initiated by the stronger Tiangongmen. This time, according to the old rules, the Tiangongmen challenged Kikiaman. During this period of time, Kikiaman had been preparing for the challenge against the Tiangongmen. Naturally, they did not have time to manufacture equipment for others. After listening to Zhang Qiuming's explanation, Zhang Meng thought for a moment before asking slowly, "What exactly is the enmity between Kikiaman and the Tiangongmen?" Zhang Qiuming shook his head when he heard this. "I'm not sure. No one knows what enmity there is between them." At this point, Zhang Qiuming paused for a moment before continuing, "However, although I don't know why they are fighting, if you think about it carefully, it's inevitable." Zhang Meng was stunned when he heard this. After a moment, he realized what was going on. Kikiaman and the Tiangongmen were both sects that manufactured equipment. As the saying went, two tigers cannot live on the same mountain. When two sects that specialized in manufacturing equipment collided, it was inevitable that there would be sparks. Zhang Meng was not interested in the conflict between the two sections. However, since no one was going to manufacture equipment for him, he had to do something about it. Chapter 117. Zhang Qiuming saw that Zhang Meng had understood, so he asked with a smile, "The Fierce Brothers, I think your matter can wait. Once the matter over there is settled, we can think of a way to invite them over. Zhang Meng heard Zhang Qiuming's words and shook his head. I've already prepared everything here. All that's left is for them to come. We can't wait any longer. At this point, Zhang Meng turned his head to look at Zhang Qiuming and asked, Prince Zhang, can you think of a way to invite them over? Zhang Qiuming shook his head. I've already thought of a way, but this matter is too big. There's still no way. At this point, Zhang Qiuming paused for a moment before continuing. Yi Xian's matter is very difficult. Their sect's important item has been lost. If they can't find it, I'm afraid Yi Xian will never be able to come. Zhang Meng heard this and asked doubtfully, since Yi Xian can't come, can't we invite someone else? After Zhang Qiuming heard Zhang Meng's words, he smiled bitterly and shook his head. I'm not sure about the Tianji sect's matters. If we invite someone else, I'm afraid you won't feel at ease. After all, you've already seen Yi Xian's secret room. His skills are really good. If we invite someone who's not as good as Yi Xian, wouldn't it ruin your matter? At this point, Zhang Qiuming suddenly turned his head to look at Zhang Meng and asked hesitantly, Oh right, the fierce brothers, I'm very curious about something. Logically speaking, no one should be able to discover our secret room. But how did you find it? The fierce brothers, can you tell me the reason? When Zhang Meng heard this, he was stunned. How should he answer? The construction of Zhang Qiuming's secret chamber was indeed brilliant. If Zhang Meng only relied on his eyes to observe, it was absolutely impossible for him to find the entrance to the secret chamber. It was precisely because the secret room was built too tightly that Zhang Meng decided to let Zhang Qiuming invite Yi Xian to build an auction house for him. Zhang Meng was sure that unless someone had the same ability as him, they would not be able to find the entrance to the secret room. What Zhang Qiuming said made a lot of sense. If they were to invite someone else, and the person's skills were not as good as Yi Xian's, then it would be really bad. Zhang Meng was preparing to build a super auction house in Mt. Xuanyi. If it were to be built by a mediocre person, Zhang Meng was really afraid that it would affect his own plans. Zhang Meng thought for a while, then said slowly, You won't understand how I found out about the secret room even if I told you. In short, I can tell you that other than me, no one else should be able to find the entrance to your secret room. You can rest assured about this. At this point, Zhang Meng paused for a while before continuing. In that case, we'll invite Yi Xian to build an auction house for us. At this point, Zhang Meng paused for a while before continuing to ask, Then, is there any way to solve the other problem? After hearing Zhang Meng's words, Zhang Qiuming was slightly relieved. Since it was not a problem with the construction of the secret room, it did not matter. After all, even if they knew the entrance to the secret room, it was useless. They still needed the key. In the face of Zhang Meng's other problem, Zhang Qiuming smiled bitterly and shook his head again. There's no way. There's also no way to solve the other problem. Kikyaman has very few people to begin with, and this time, they're facing a huge army of Tiangongmen. Therefore, they need to do their best to overcome this difficulty. At this point, Zhang Qiuming's tone became more serious. He continued, It's said that there's a bet between the two sides. If the Tiangongmen lose, they'll give their sect's treasure, the cauldron of heaven and earth, to Kikyaman. If Kikyaman loses, the entire sect will disappear. They'll submit to the Tiangongmen and become a subsidiary of the Tiangongmen. After hearing Zhang Qiuming's words, Zhang Meng secretly shook his head. The bet between the two sides was too big. Although Zhang Meng had never seen the cauldron of heaven and earth before, it was definitely not an ordinary item if it could become the Tiangongmen's treasure. On the other hand, if the Seven Skills sect lost, the wager would be their own sect. The competition between the two sides had reached a point where it would not end until one side was dead. It was almost impossible to resolve the situation. At this thought, Zhang Meng asked, If that's the case, can we ask the Tiangongmen to make the equipment for us? After all, although the Tiangongmen have to give up their treasure for this bet, the entire sect will not suffer any losses. It shouldn't be a problem if they send someone over. Zhang Meng had his reasons for saying this. The Tiangongmen were a large sect and were famous for their equipment. There was no reason why they couldn't send someone to make the black feather cloak for them. When Zhang Qiuming heard this, he shook his head again. The fierce brothers, you don't understand the situation. Although the Tiangongmen are also famous for their equipment, they are different from Kikiamen. They mainly make equipment made of iron or equipment with attribute. On the other hand, the Qiqiao sect mainly forges soft armor and other similar equipment. For example, they sew cotton armor or leather armor. At this point, Zhang Qiuming paused for a moment before continuing. It is precisely because the two sects make different items that they have differences in opinion. On the other hand, the Tiangongmen always wanted to take Kikiamen under their wing to make up for the shortcomings of their own sect. Kikiamen naturally didn't want to belong to anyone else. Because of this difference in opinion, the two sects had a continuous conflict. After listening to Zhang Qiuming's words, Zhang Meng could not help but laugh bitterly. The person he wanted to find could not be replaced even if he wanted to. Yi Xian had great skills and building an auction house for him was the best choice. If he invited someone else, Zhang Meng was afraid that his skills would not be good enough. After listening to Zhang Qiuming's explanation about the black feather cloak, Zhang Meng naturally would not invite the Tiangongmen over. Thinking about it this way, it was understandable that Zhang Qiuming did not invite anyone over this time. When Zhang Qiuming saw Zhang Meng lowering his head and thinking, he could not help but persuade him again. The fierce brothers, why don't you wait until they are done with their business? It shouldn't be too late to invite them over then. After listening to Zhang Qiuming's words, Zhang Meng thought that Zhang Qiuming's words made sense. After a period of time, he believed that the two sects would be done with their business. At that time, he would naturally be able to invite them over. However, he was not willing to wait. Everything had been prepared. How could it be delayed because of these two people? Thinking of this, Zhang Meng raised his head and looked at Zhang Qiuming. He asked with a smile, "It's useless for us to talk here. Why don't we personally go and see what's going on over there? If we can help them, we should help them. This way, it should be much faster." Zhang Qiuming heard this and shook his head. "We can't help them with their business." Chapter 118. After Zhang Meng heard Zhang Qiuming's words, he asked doubtfully, "Why? Why can't we help?" Zhang Qiuming smiled bitterly and shook his head. "First of all, that's their sex matter. It doesn't seem appropriate for outsiders like us to interfere. Also, even if we were to interfere, we wouldn't be able to." At this point, Zhang Qiuming paused for a moment before continuing. Yi Xian's matter was caused by them losing a treasure. Unless that treasure really wasn't stolen by Yi Xian, we can help them find that treasure and prove his innocence. That way, we might be able to clarify the whole matter. However, it's not that easy. The Tianji sect has been investigating this matter for a long time, but they still haven't found any clues. You can imagine how difficult this matter is. As outsiders, we're not familiar with their sect's situation. Even if we wanted to help, we wouldn't know where to start. At this point, Zhang Qiuming looked at Zhang Meng and smiled bitterly. "The fierce brothers, don't you think so? Even if we went, we wouldn't be able to solve the problem. Right now, we can only wait. There's no other way." After Zhang Meng heard Zhang Qiuming's words, he frowned and asked, "What about the second matter? Can we help with the battle between Kikiamen and the Tiangongmen?" Zhang Qiuming shook his head. "We can't help with the matters between the two sections. Besides, even if we wanted to help, we wouldn't be able to." Zhang Meng was stunned. "Why? Why can't we help?" Zhang Qiuming spread his hands. "They're all good at making equipment. As for us, we don't know anything about this matter. Even if we go, we can only cheer them on from the side. We really can't help with anything else. After Zhang Meng heard Zhang Qiuming's words, he smiled bitterly in his heart. Neither of these two matters could be solved by strength alone. Even the Tianji sect didn't know what was going on with Yi Xian, let alone an outsider. No one knew whether the treasure was stolen by Yi Xian or not. Even if Zhang Meng went, strength alone wouldn't be able to solve this matter. Kikiaman's matter was even more difficult to solve. Whether the two sects won or lost, it was their sect's matter. It had nothing to do with outsiders. Zhang Meng didn't know how to make equipment. If he went, he would only be able to destroy the Tiangongmen with one punch. When Zhang Qiuming saw Zhang Meng's hesitation, he smiled and said, "The fierce brothers, actually, you don't have to be anxious. I think that Kikiaman's matter might take some time, but Yi Xian's matter should be answered soon. As long as you wait patiently, the Tianji sect should be able to solve this problem soon." Zhang Meng nodded when he heard this. Zhang Qiuming's words made sense. The Tianji sect would definitely search desperately for the missing treasure. Therefore, this matter should be solved soon. However, with his previous experience, Zhang Meng was still a little worried. After thinking for a while, he said slowly, "Anyway, it's not a big deal now. I still want to go and have a look. I'll bring Yi Xian back directly after they solve the problem. That way we won't waste any time." Zhang Qiuming was stunned when he heard this. Then, he smiled bitterly and nodded. "All right then. In that case, I'll accompany the fierce brothers. I'll also go to Fan Gongzi's place and get my black feather cloak back." Zhang Meng nodded. "In that case, let's go together." Since they were going to the south region, Zhang Meng didn't delay. He first returned to Twin Bull Mountain and gave everyone instructions. Then, he returned to Cianwood City and met up with Zhang Qiuming. The four of them rode their horses and set off for the south region. Along the way, the guards of the city lord's mansion cleared the way. Some bandits didn't dare to approach, and could only watch from afar. In addition, the group traveled during the day and rested at night. It was quite safe along the way. The south region was very far from Cianwood City. It took them 3 days to reach the south region. Their destination this time was the Tianji sect. However, the Tianji sect wasn't in the city of the south region. Instead, it was on a mountain 50 miles away from the city. Qingfeng Mountain was where the Tianji sect was located. That afternoon, they rode their horses to the foot of Qingfeng Mountain. Standing at the foot of the mountain, Zhang Meng only felt that this mountain was very tall. The hillside was full of greenery, with tall trees, red flowers, green grass, and strange peaks and strange rocks everywhere. Halfway up the mountain, looking as far as the eye could see, he could see faint clouds and mist surrounding it. Seeing this mountain, Zhang Meng couldn't help but praise. This scenery was definitely formed naturally. It wasn't like the various scenic spots that could be meticulously built in the later generations. When they reached the foot of the mountain, Zhang Qiuming led Zhang Meng to a small path. The slope of this path was gentle and wide. Even if they rode horses, they could still go up the mountain. Following the small path, the four of them rode their horses all the way up the mountain. The Tianji sect was not built on the top of the main peak. Instead, it was built on an extremely wide and flat beam. They built a large house. Looking at the majestic door and the continuous rising and falling pavilions in the courtyard, Zhang Meng felt that he should be very reliable to find these people to build the auction house. When the four of them arrived at the door, they saw 4 disciples of the Tianji sect guarding the door. As soon as the 4 of them approached, the 4 disciples had already walked up to them. "Why are the 2 of you here?" When Zhang Qiuming heard this, he hurriedly replied with a smile. "I've already sent someone here to report, but no one has gone over yet. I'm just here to see what's going on." When the 4 disciples heard Zhang Qiuming's words, they first looked at each other. Then, a slightly older disciple asked again, "Please show me your registration number." When Zhang Qiuming heard this, He hurriedly took out a wooden token and handed it to the disciple. When Zhang Qiuming took out the wooden token, Zhang Meng had already seen it clearly. There was a row of words on the wooden token. In the middle of it was a number 4. After that disciple received the wooden token, he only glanced at it once before returning it. At the same time, he gestured for them to enter. Zhang Qiuming received the wooden token and nodded to that disciple. Then, he took the lead and walked through the door. After entering the door, there was a small path. On both sides of the path, there were some brightly colored flowers and green grass. As they walked along the path, they didn't walk far before another door appeared. Behind this door, there were a few disciples guarding it. This time, Zhang Qiuming didn't waste any time and directly handed the wooden token over. A burly disciple took Zhang Qiuming's token. With just a glance, he saw the number on the wooden token. Number 4. That disciple was stunned at first, then he placed the wooden token on the table and said with a smile, "So, you're looking for Yi Xian." Chapter 119. South County Branch of the Tianji Sect. Branch Leader Sun Xinjing. Sun Xinjing took in 8 disciples. First disciple, Lv Wenkong. Second disciple, Tang Jianan. Third disciple, Zhang Liji. Fourth disciple, Yi Xian. Fifth disciple, Bai Jianmu. Sixth disciple, Lu Huarong. Seventh disciple, Mei Guangji. Eighth disciple, Li Xueyan. The disciple who took Zhang Qiuming's wooden token looked at Zhang Qiuming and said with a smile, "Junior Master Yi has something to do now, and it's not convenient for him to go out. If possible, you can choose someone else and we can bring you there immediately." Zhang Qiuming was about to speak when another disciple came up to him with a smile. "Young Master, Junior Master Yi has something to do and I'm afraid he won't be able to build mechanisms for others in the future. If you don't mind, you can ask my master to build mechanisms for you." Zhang Qiuming was stunned and asked curiously, "Your master is?" After hearing Zhang Qiuming's words, the disciple hurriedly said, "My master is rank 3rd and is Junior Master Ye's 3rd senior brother." Zhang Qiuming nodded and turned to look at Zhang Meng. He asked with a smile, "The fierce brothers, what do you mean?" Zhang Meng shook his head. "Since you said that Yi Xian's skills are better, we'd better look for him." After hearing Zhang Meng's words, the disciple's smile froze on his face. After a while, he said resentfully, "Young Master, Junior Master Yi is in big trouble. I'm afraid you won't be able to see him." Zhang Meng was stunned. "Why?" The disciple explained, "Junior Master Yi has been locked up in the Repentance Pavilion. Even if he wants to come out, he can't." Zhang Meng heard this. "What is the Repentance Pavilion?" The disciple smiled and explained, "Of course, it's prepared for those disciples who have made mistakes." Zhang Meng thought for a moment and then asked slowly, "Can I meet Yi Xian?" The disciple shook his head. "That's impossible. Unless the branch leader says so, it's impossible to enter the Repentance Pavilion." Zhang Meng said, "Then can I meet your branch leader?" That disciple was stunned when he heard that. "Then," he said, "how could our branch master be someone you can meet just because you want to? You have to make an appointment first. Only after our branch master agrees can you meet him." Zhang Meng asked, "Is there any way for me to ask for your help?" The disciple shook his head. "No, there's no other way." At this point, the disciple paused for a moment before continuing, "Of course, there are exceptions. If the project is really huge, you can also receive the branch master personally." After Zhang Meng listened to the disciple's words, he nodded and said, "That's good. Go and inform them. You can make the decision. Tell them that there's a big deal coming." That disciple was stunned when he heard that. The other disciple who had been standing next to him suddenly sneered. "Old 5, don't believe him. If he really had a big deal, why would he look for Yi Xian?" After hearing this, Zhang Meng was stunned. The two disciples who spoke just now called Yi Xian Martial Uncle Yi. However, this person called him by his name. Could it be that this person's seniority was very high too? Old Five also heard this and couldn't help but frown. Li Tai, although Martial Uncle Yi made a mistake, he's still your martial uncle. It's not very appropriate for you to call him by his name like this. Hearing this, Li Tai sneered and said with disdain, "What's so inappropriate about that? He stole the sect's treasure. Could it be that he still wants to be our martial uncle? In my opinion, it won't be long before he is expelled from the sect. It's only a matter of time before I call him by his name. What does it matter?" Old Five's expression changed when he heard that. However, he didn't say anything else and turned to look at Zhang Meng. "Young master, your matter is really difficult to handle." Zhang Meng smiled. "You're called Old Five, right? Old Five, don't worry. I'm really going to build a very big project." At this point, Zhang Meng pointed at the courtyard of the Tianji sect and said with a smile, "The thing I'm going to build is probably bigger than your courtyard. Old Five, don't you think it's a big project?" Old Five was stunned when he heard that. When he finally reacted, he asked in disbelief, Really? The courtyard of the Heavenly Secrets sect occupied a large area. Not only was it spacious, but the pavilions in the courtyard were also exceptionally exquisite. Furthermore, there were also powerful mechanisms in each of them. Therefore, the amount of manpower used to construct the courtyard was astonishing. If the person in front of him was really going to build such a big courtyard, it would definitely be a big project. It would be a super big project. Old Five didn't dare to delay. He hurriedly clasped his fists at Zhang Meng. "Young master, are you really not lying to me?" Zhang Meng smiled and nodded. "Don't worry. I definitely won't lie to you." Old Five looked at Zhang Meng's smile and felt that it wasn't fake. He decided that regardless of whether this was true or not, he would report this matter first. Even if the person in front of him was lying, it was still better than messing things up. Old Five turned around and wanted to report this matter. However, he didn't expect to be stopped by Li Tai. "Old Five, look at him. Based on his attire, he's just a servant of the young master in front. How can you believe his words?" Old Five was stunned again when he heard that. He couldn't help but turn to look at Zhang Meng. Zhang Meng's attire was indeed similar to what Li Tai had said. This wasn't because Zhang Meng was very low-key. It was because he had been very busy recently and didn't have time to dress himself up. At this moment, although Zhang Meng wasn't wearing coarse linen clothes, they weren't high-quality goods either. On the other hand, Zhang Qiuming was wearing luxurious clothes and had an extraordinary aura. Comparing the two, Li Tai's misunderstanding that Zhang Meng was Zhang Qiuming's servant wasn't wrong. Old Five looked at Zhang Meng's attire and then looked at Zhang Qiuming's attire. He couldn't help but feel suspicious. Seeing that Old Five believed his words, Li Tai turned to look at Zhang Qiuming and said with a smile, "Young master, Yi Xian stole the sect's treasure and committed such a huge crime. He will definitely be expelled from the sect in the future. Young master, don't worry about such a person. What if he intentionally left something behind when he built the secret mechanism for you? At that time, it would be too late to regret." Speaking up to this point, Li Tai paused and looked at Zhang Qiuming's expression before continuing. "For those who build mechanisms, the most important thing is integrity. Yi Xian doesn't care about the sect's kindness and forgets righteousness for the sake of profit. It's best to be careful of such a person. Young master, our Tianji sect is filled with talent. Yi Xian isn't the only one. You can choose someone else to build a house for you." Li Tai's words were reasonable. If the person who built the mechanism for others was really evil and intentionally left a secret door for them to use in the future, that would be the worst thing that could happen. Chapter 120. After hearing Li Tai's words, Zhang Meng also began to hesitate. If Yi Xian really did steal from the sect like Li Tai said, then no matter what the reason was, it was unforgivable. As a machine engineer, one had to abide by the ethics of the profession. Being a good person was a basic requirement. Only by being a good person could one be an upright machine engineer. Thinking of this, Zhang Meng asked, "Did Yi Xian really steal your sect's treasure?" Li Tai nodded proudly, "Of course. Who else could it be other than him?" This time, before Zhang Meng could answer, Old Fifth said, "Li Tai, this matter hasn't been investigated clearly yet. Don't speak nonsense. If this matter wasn't done by Marshal Uncle Yi, then wouldn't it be bad for Marshal Uncle Yi if you say it now?" After hearing Old Fifth's words, Li Tai sneered. "Now that the evidence is conclusive and the item has been found at his place, what else is there to investigate clearly? This matter is definitely done by him." Speaking up to this point, Li Tai sneered again before continuing, "If he didn't steal it, then why did the branch leader lock him up in the Repentance Pavilion? Isn't it because the branch leader also believes that he stole it?" After hearing Li Tai's words, Old Fifth shook his head. "Li Tai, the reason why we locked Marshal Uncle Yi up in the Repentance Pavilion is because we haven't caught the real thief yet. It doesn't necessarily mean that Marshal Uncle Yi is the thief." Li Tai turned his head to look at Old Fifth and sneered. "Old Fifth, you're speaking up for Yi Xian like this. Does it mean that when he stole the treasure, you also benefited from it?" After hearing Li Tai's words, Old Fifth's face immediately flushed red. He loudly defended himself. "Li Tai, don't talk nonsense. What does this have to do with me?" Li Tai snorted coldly. "It doesn't have anything to do with you? If it doesn't have anything to do with you, then why are you speaking up for Yi Xian?" Old Fifth angrily pointed at Li Tai and said angrily, "Li Tai, what relationship do I have with Marshal Uncle Yi? Could it be that I would benefit from his theft?" After Li Tai heard Old Five's words, he immediately laughed out loud. "Old Five, what's wrong? You're starting to accuse him of stealing? I'm not the only one saying this." Old Fifth was obviously not Li Tai's opponent. He was rendered speechless by Li Tai's words. He could only stammer in anger, but he couldn't say anything. Just at this moment, an older disciple by the fifth brother's side came to his side. Looking at Li Tai, he angrily said, "Li Tai, don't go too far. Who here doesn't know that your master doesn't get along with Marshal Uncle Yi? It's fine that you're trying to sow discord between them, but Marshal Uncle Yi is still your martial uncle. Moreover, he hasn't been expelled from the sect like you said, so he's still your martial uncle. Right now, you're directly calling him by his name in public. If the branch leader finds out, I'm afraid you won't be able to get any benefits." After hearing this, Li Tai's expression changed. He turned to look at the young man and said angrily, "Han Jiqing, don't meddle in my affairs. It's not your turn to speak here." After saying this, Li Tai turned to look at Old Fifth. He sneered and said, "Old Fifth, I'm talking to you. Don't tell me that your junior brother is interrupting us. Shouldn't you take care of him? Don't tell me you have to wait for Master to say something before you take care of him?" Old Fifth was stunned when he heard this, but he immediately reacted. He turned to look at Li Tai and said angrily, "Li Tai, you don't need to meddle in our affairs. On the contrary, you're the one who's being disrespectful and calling Marshal Uncle Yi by his name. I think that if Master finds out about this, the one who will be punished will be you." Now that Old Fifth had a helper, his anger increased greatly. His words became much sharper. However, Li Tai wasn't afraid at all. He pointed at Old Fifth and said with a cold smile, "I understand. Since you're protecting Yi Xian like this, it must be related to this matter. After I report this to Master, I'll definitely investigate this matter and see if you're related to this matter or not." Old Fifth was shocked when he saw Li Tai's cold smile. This Li Tai was a despicable person who did what he said. Yi Xian's incident and his imprisonment in the Repentance Pavilion, if it wasn't for his master, Bai Jianmu, who instigated it, he probably wouldn't have ended up like this. Thinking of this, Old Fifth didn't want to be entangled with this despicable person anymore. He turned his head and ignored him. However, Li Tai didn't let him off. Seeing Old Fifth turn his head away, he snorted coldly, "Old Fifth, today's matter is definitely not over. I'll definitely report this matter to Master and let him investigate whether you're related to this matter or not." Old Fifth's face turned ashen when he heard Li Tai's words. He turned to look at Li Tai and said angrily, "Li Tai, what do you want?" Li Tai sneered and shook his head. "I don't want anything. I just want to know who else is related to this matter." At this point, Li Tai turned his head and looked at the people around him. When everyone saw Li Tai's gaze, they all subconsciously took a step back. This Li Tai was definitely a despicable person. He was like a poisonous snake. As long as he bit you, he would definitely not let go. Facing such a person, it was too late to avoid him. Who would want to get into trouble with him? Li Tai looked at everyone's fearful eyes and nodded his head in satisfaction before continuing to speak. "Old Fifth, if you apologize to me right now, I can consider letting you go. If not, humph, you should know the consequences." However, when Han Jiqing, who was beside Old Fifth, heard Li Tai's words, his lungs were about to explode. He clenched his fists and was about to rush over and fight Li Tai. However, just as he took a step forward, he was stopped by Old Fifth. "Jiqing, what are you doing? Don't you know that if you do this, you'll cause a lot of trouble for Master?" When Han Jiqing heard Old Fifth's words, his expression froze and his footsteps stopped. However, the anger in his eyes was about to burst out of his eye socket. He wanted to rush over and fight Li Tai to the death. Looking at Han Jiqing, who was stopped by Old Fifth, Li Tai sneered and loosened his clenched fists. "Brat, consider yourself lucky. If you dare to rush over, humph." Although Li Tai didn't finish his words, everyone in the 4th district understood what he meant. Li Tai's words were harsh. Logically speaking, such a person would have been beaten up by others. However, until now, why did no one dare to beat him up? It was because Li Tai's martial arts were very high. In their generation, he could be considered as one of the top experts. Most of the disciples in the Tianji sect did not know martial art. This was because their main occupation was a mechanic, not a warrior. Therefore, among these disciples, only half of them knew martial arts. Chapter 121. Han Jiqing was just an ordinary young man. He had just joined the sect and didn't know any martial arts. If he had rushed over to fight Li Tai, he would have died miserably. Li Tai sneered when he saw Old Five holding Han Jiqing back. "Old Five, apologize to me now. If you don't, we'll see what happens." Old Five's face turned green when he heard Li Tai's words. Old Five had been in the Sky Fortune sect for a long time, so he knew Li Tai's character. Li Tai might not do other things, but he was definitely capable of doing things that would harm others. Although Li Tai's martial arts were high, Old Five wasn't weak either. However, this wasn't a matter of martial arts. If Li Tai really said that he had something to do with Yi Xian's matter at this critical juncture, he would not be the only one who would be implicated. He was afraid that even his master would be implicated. If there were any unforeseen circumstances, wouldn't Master be harmed as well? Because of this, Old Five didn't dare to do anything to Li Tai. If he touched Li Tai's finger today, then he would get endless revenge. Looking at Li Tai's proud smile, Old Five felt bitter. He wanted to ignore this guy, but Li Tai didn't want to let him go. In order not to implicate the sect, Old Five suddenly gritted his teeth and looked up at Li Tai. He said bitterly, "Li Tai, what happened just now?" Before Old Five could finish his words, a strange scene suddenly appeared. Li Tai didn't wait for Old Five to finish and knelt down. Yes, Li Tai knelt down in front of Old Five. Seeing this, Old Five's eyes widened. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. He wasn't the only one who couldn't believe it. Everyone around him couldn't believe it. A villain like Li Tai knelt down in front of others. What was going on? Everyone looked at Li Tai in confusion. They were all wondering why Li Tai would do such a thing. In fact, they didn't know why Li Tai would do such a thing. Even Li Tai himself was confused. Just now, when Li Tai saw that Old Fifth was going to apologize to him, he felt a burst of pride in his heart. Just when he wanted to take the opportunity to teach Old Fifth a few words, he suddenly felt his knees go soft. His entire body suddenly couldn't stand, and he involuntarily knelt in front of Old Fifth. Seeing this situation, Li Tai was shocked. He hurriedly pushed his knees on the ground and tried to stand up. However, he did not expect that although he wanted to exert strength on his legs, he could not exert any strength on his knees. No matter how hard Li Tai tried to stand up, it was a pity that his knees were unable to exert any strength. At this time, Li Tai already knew that things were not good. This time, he had lost a lot of faith. If he continued to kneel like this, Li Tai would have the heart to die. Since he couldn't stand up, then he might as well lie down. Thinking of this, Li Tai tilted his body and wanted to lie down. However, he did not expect that just as his body leaned to the side, he felt his shoulder being grabbed by someone. Li Tai hurriedly turned his head to look and saw the young man who was not well dressed looking at him with a smile. "Brother, you must be possessed by the devil." The person who came was Zhang Meng. When Zhang Meng saw that Li Tai was about to lie down, he hurriedly stretched out his hand to stop him. How could such a good show not continue? If Li Tai lay down, then there would be no more show. Although Zhang Meng did not know Li Tai, after what happened just now, Zhang Meng did not think that Li Tai was a good person. Therefore, a little punishment would be good for everyone. If Li Tai knew that he was wrong, then it would be even better. Of course, this was not something that Zhang Meng was concerned about. After Li Tai heard Zhang Meng's words, his heart was also filled with doubts. Could it be that he had really gone mad? Although Li Tai had not seen this kind of thing with his own eyes, he had heard of it before. It was said that there were many kinds of qi deviation, and the appearance of it was also different. Thinking of this, Li Tai suddenly shouted at the few disciples beside him, "You guys, quickly come over and carry me back." When the few disciples heard Li Tai's shout, they were all stunned. Immediately, they reacted and subconsciously took 2 steps back, hiding behind the crowd. Seeing this, Li Tai almost flew into a rage. He pointed his finger at the disciples and roared, "All of you, remember this. If you don't carry me back today, all of you will be considered thieves. Not a single one of you will be able to escape." Li Tai's words were effective. As soon as he finished speaking, the few disciples looked at each other and slowly walked forward. They first put Li Tai down, then lifted his arms and legs and walked towards his residence. During the whole process, Li Tai did not look at Old Fifth because it was too embarrassing. He actually knelt down in front of Old Fifth. Old Fifth was still in a confused state as he looked at Li Tai's back being carried away. What was going on? Could it be that Li Tai had really gone mad? When Old Fifth thought of this, Han Jiqing had already walked to his side with a face full of joy. He smiled and said, "Second senior brother, good people will be rewarded. This kind of person should be rewarded." After saying this, Han Jiqing turned his head and looked at the direction Li Tai left. He fiercely spat out a mouthful of saliva before continuing, "If the heavens have eyes, then let his legs go mad forever. Let him never stand up again, and save him from harming others." Old Fifth heard Han Jiqing's words and nodded. Then, he reacted and immediately turned his head to look at Han Jiqing. He angrily rebuked, "Don't talk nonsense. How can you say such words?" When Han Jiqing heard this, he shrunk his head and whispered, "Am I wrong? This kind of bad person should be let go of forever." Everyone was puzzled by the whole thing. Even Zhang Qiuming was puzzled. His confusion was different from the other disciples. Li Tai suddenly knelt down in front of old Fifth. Why was this scene so familiar to him? Zhang Qiuming remembered very clearly that when they were all injured and Zhang Meng went to find food for them, Mu Hongyi and the others came. At that time, they also had a bit of unpleasantness. As a result, this scene also happened. Inexplicably, the angry Shin Feisher knelt down in front of Ho Daki. This scene appeared too suddenly. Everyone thought that Shin Feisher wanted to fight with Ho Daki, but they did not expect that when he rushed to the front, he would kneel down. Now, when Old Fifth was about to apologize to Li Tai knelt down in front of Old Fifth. These two incidents were so similar. Both were inexplicable and the ending was unexpected. Zhang Qiuming suddenly turned his head to look at Zhang Meng. A thought suddenly came to his mind. Could it be that these two incidents were done by Zhang Meng? Chapter 122. Seeing Li Tai being carried away by the crowd, Zhang Meng walked to Old Fifth's side, patted his shoulder, and asked with a smile. Then, this annoying fellow left. This time, you can bring me to see your branch master, right? Old Fifth thought for a while and shook his head. Not yet. I have to report to the leader and see if he has time to see you. Zhang Meng nodded. Then go and report to him. After Old Fifth heard Zhang Meng's words, he quickly turned to Han Jiqing and said, Go to the leader now and ask for his permission. Hearing this, Han Jiqing hurriedly nodded in agreement, turned around and ran inside. Before he could run far, Zhang Meng shouted again, Don't forget to tell your leader that there's a big deal coming. Old Fifth looked at Zhang Meng doubtfully and asked hesitantly as he looked at Han Jiqing's back. Young master, do you really want to build a big woolen house? You're not lying to me, right? Zhang Meng smiled and shook his head. Don't worry, I won't lie to you. Zhang Meng paused for a moment before looking in the direction that Li Tai had left in and asked. Just now, I saw that Li Tai didn't seem to get along with Yi Xian. Is there something going on? Old Fifth shook his head. It's nothing. It's not a big deal. Zhang Meng didn't continue to ask since Old Fifth didn't want to talk about it. After all, it was their sex business, and they had no obligation to tell him. Thinking of this, Zhang Meng asked again, By the way, what's the Repentance Pavilion you were talking about? Old Fifth heard Zhang Meng's question and hesitated for a while before answering. The Repentance Pavilion is used to punish sect disciples. Zhang Meng asked, Is the Repentance Pavilion very dangerous? Old Fifth nodded. It's not dangerous, it's just that. At this point, Old Fifth hesitated for a moment, then stopped talking and didn't say anything else. Zhang Meng was curious. If it's not dangerous, why do you look so pale? Old Fifth smiled. It's nothing. The Repentance Pavilion is just a secret room. It's not big and it's tightly sealed. Once the door is closed, there's no light inside. At this point, Old Fifth sighed. Although there is no danger in the Repentance Pavilion, many people can't take it and become crazy after staying in that dark place for a long time. Zhang Meng was stunned. He finally understood what kind of place the Repentance Pavilion was. Not many people could stand it in that kind of environment. At that moment, 5 people walked out of the courtyard. The person in the lead was a young man in his 20s with a strong build. Seeing this young man from afar, Old Fifth's face suddenly changed, and his expression became nervous. Zhang Meng was puzzled when he saw the change in Old Fifth's expression. He asked, Old Fifth, who are these people? When Old Fifth heard Zhang Meng's question, his originally nervous expression became even more tense. He glanced at the person who had come over once more before replying slowly. These people are Master's Uncle Bai's disciples. The young man in the lead is Master's Uncle Bai's eldest disciple, Han Lin. At this point, Old Fifth lowered his voice and continued, Han Lin is the #1 expert of our younger generation. It is precisely because of this that Li Tai is so arrogant. Zhang Meng nodded and asked, That senior Uncle Bai of yours, from what you said, doesn't seem to be on good terms with Yi Xian. Old Fifth heard Zhang Meng's words and his face changed. However, he couldn't talk about the things between them behind their back. He could only shake his head and smile bitterly. I don't know either. Although he didn't hear Old Fifth's exact answer, Zhang Meng could guess from Old Fifth's tone that Yi Xian and Master's Uncle Bai didn't drink. However, as a disciple of the same generation, Old Fifth couldn't say anything bad about the previous generation. While the two were talking, Han Lin had already brought a few of his juniors to Old Fifth. Han Lin stopped and a young man behind him quickly walked to the front. He looked at Old Fifth and shouted sternly, Old Fifth, you've become so capable. Laowu, you've grown up. Not only did you collude with Yi Xian to steal our sect's treasure, but you also dared to kill second senior brother. Now, tell me honestly, who sent you? The young man stretched out his arm and waved it in front of Old Fifth. His eyes suddenly widened as he stared at Old Fifth's face. If you tell me who sent you, I'll let you go today. If you don't, I'll let you have a taste of my power. Seeing the muscles on Lu Qi's arm bulging, Old Fifth felt a chill in his heart. Although Lu Qi's martial arts were not very good, he was vicious. In the entire South County branch, no one was willing to provoke him. Most importantly, Old Fifth's martial arts were not very good either. In the end, he might not even be as good as Lu Qi's martial arts. Old Fifth turned his head to look beside him. There was no one left. All the disciples of the South County branch would take turns to guard the gate. On one hand, they would protect the safety of the sect. On the other hand, they could also receive guests. Sun Xinjing had a total of 8 disciples. He sent 6 disciples to guard the gate while the other 2 disciples guarded the safety of the courtyard. These 6 disciples were divided into 2 groups and took turns to guard the gate. The disciples on duty today were the disciples of the 3rd disciple, Zhang Liji, the 5th disciple, Bai Jianmu, and the 6th disciple, Lu Huarong. Zhang Liji's disciples sent Old Fifth and Han Jiqing. Bai Jianmu's disciples sent Li Tai and another disciple. Lu Huarong's 2 disciples had already carried Li Rong back. Only Han Jiqing was left. He also went to the courtyard to report. Old Fifth was the only one left at the gate. However, Han Lin had brought 4 of his junior brothers over. Lu Qi's expression changed when he saw that OL-5 didn't answer his question. His raised arm suddenly dropped down and rested on OL-5's shoulder. At the same time, he stared at OL-5 with a pair of cold eyes and asked word by word. Old Fifth, are you going to tell me or not? Faced with Lu Qi's threatening words, Old Fifth's forehead began to sweat. Old Fifth knew that he was facing a big choice. Although what happened just now was very strange, Old Fifth still believed that it was because Li Tai went berserk while cultivating. Otherwise, it would be impossible to plot against Li Tai in front of so many people. Old Fifth calmed down a little and struggled to break free from Lu Qi's hand. He took a few steps back and said loudly, "Everyone saw it. Everyone saw what happened just now. It's obvious that Li Tai's cultivation went berserk. What does it have to do with me? Why don't you ask others and see if they know?" Chapter 123. After hearing Old Fifth's answer, Lu Qi sneered. "That can't be right. Why did I hear that it was your master who ordered him to do it?" After Old Fifth heard Lu Qi's words, he was stunned for a moment before reacting angrily. "Lu Qi, what nonsense are you talking about? Li Tai clearly went mad. What does it have to do with my master? If you dare to spout nonsense again, don't blame me for being rude." After hearing Old Fifth's words, Lu Qi sneered and shook his head. Then, he strode towards Old Fifth. Lu Qi was much taller than Old Fifth. In addition, he had a strong body. In terms of appearance, he was definitely much stronger than Old Fifth. However, the two of them had never fought before. It was hard to say whose martial arts were stronger. Seeing Lu Qi walking towards him, Old Fifth subconsciously clenched his fist. His eyes were vigilant as he observed his opponent's movements. Lu Qi walked slowly towards Old Fifth and sneered, "Old Fifth, are you really not going to say who ordered you to do this?" When Old Fifth heard this, he hurriedly explained, "This is just a misunderstanding. Everyone saw it. Li Tai became like that because he went mad." When Lu Qi heard this, he snorted coldly and shouted sternly, "Old Fifth, since you are so stubborn, don't blame me for being rude." After saying this, Lu Qi suddenly growled. He raised his fist that he had long prepared and punched towards Old Fifth's face. When Old Fifth saw this, he hurriedly dodged this heavy blow. Just as he was about to explain again, he saw that Lu Qi's other fist had already turned into an uppercut and was coming towards his side. When Old Fifth saw Lu Qi's punch, he had a bad feeling. Lu Qi's two fists had already sealed off both his left and right path. At this time, it was too late to retreat. Old Fifth had no choice but to block Lu Qi's uppercut with his fist. Time passed in the blink of an eye. Their arms collided in the blink of an eye. Old Fifth only felt a huge force coming from his arm. The shock caused his arm to go numb. He could not help but take 2 steps back before he could stabilize himself. After he steadied himself, Old Fifth shook his arm. He felt that the numbness in his arm had not disappeared. Lu Qi sneered proudly when he saw Old Fifth being knocked back by his punch. "Old Fifth, I'll give you one last chance. If you don't tell me, don't blame me for beating you until you tell me." At that moment, Old Fifth already knew what they were planning to do. If he was beaten up by them and had no choice but to say that it was his master who ordered him to do this, then it would be a big problem. These people in front of him would definitely accuse his master of colluding with Yi Xian to steal the treasure. When that happened, both his master and Yi Xian would probably be expelled from the sect. Thinking of how vicious the person in front of him was, Old Fifth clenched his teeth in anger, but there was nothing he could do. He could barely handle Zhang Qi alone, not to mention the fact that Han Lin was standing behind Zhang Qi. Seeing that Old Fifth did not speak, Zhang Qi suddenly roared. He waved his fists and smashed them toward Old Fifth. Old Fifth had suffered a loss last time, so he would naturally be careful this time. When he saw Zhang Qi's fist coming toward him, he quickly stretched out his arm to meet Zhang Qi's fist. Bang! Their fists collided with each other, producing a muffled sound. Then, both of them took a few steps back. Old Fifth took a total of 3 steps back before he could stabilize himself. Lu Qi, on the other hand, only took 2 steps back. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Lu Qi immediately threw a punch at Old Fifth as soon as he steadied himself. Old Fifth took 1 more step back than Lu Qi. By the time he steadied himself, Lu Qi had already rushed toward him again. Faced with Lu Qi's extremely fast fist, Old Fifth did not dare to take it head-on. Because he attacked in a hurry, he was definitely not as strong as Lu Qi in terms of strength. Therefore, the best thing to do now was to dodge. That was the only thought in Old Fifth's mind. He immediately stomped his feet on the ground and jumped to the side to dodge Lu Qi's attack this time. Lu Qi was only slightly surprised that his punch missed. He immediately took a big step forward and chased after Lao Wu. At the same time, he swung his fist again. As he moved forward, he also threw a punch at Lao Wu. This time, Lu Qi's punch was stronger, and Old Fifth did not dare to take it head-on. In desperation, he could only take a step to the side again in an attempt to dodge this attack. Seeing that, Lu Qi sneered. His punch, which was originally in a straight line, suddenly changed into a sweeping posture and hit Old Fifth's head. Seeing that he could no longer dodge it, Old Fifth suddenly waved his fists and hit Lu Qi's fist at the same time. Lu Qi's punch was very fast and carried inertia. Naturally, the strength was not small. Although Old Five blocked it with both fists, he was in a panic and could only fight evenly with Lu Qi's fist. Lu Qi's fist was shaken back. Although Lu Qi's fist was knocked back, he still had another fist. Lu Qi's other fist was suddenly like a poisonous snake. It went from bottom to top, looking for Old Fifth. Facing Lu Qi's attack, Old Fifth wanted to withdraw his fist to block it, but it was too late. He could only raise his leg to block Lu Qi's fist. At the same time, he waved his fist from top to bottom and hit Lu Qi. Lu Qi's fist hit Old Fifth's leg like lightning. Then, he immediately jumped to the side and dodged Old Fifth's attack. After Old Fifth's leg was hit by Lu Qi's fist, he only felt a piercing pain in his leg. It was so painful that he almost screamed out loud. He also staggered back 2 steps before he could stand firm. After standing firm, Old Fifth only felt bursts of pain in his leg. He hurriedly tried to move it. When he felt that his bones were fine, and he only suffered some external injuries, he was slightly relieved. Looking at Lu Qi, who was rushing over again, Old Fifth frowned and decided to change his tactics. If he let Lu Qi continue to chase him like this, he was afraid that Lu Qi would hit his vital points one of the time. Thinking of this, Old Fifth suddenly roared when Lu Qi was just in front of him. Then, he somersaulted in the air and dodged Lu Qi's attack. When Old Fifth's body completely turned around in the air, he immediately waved his fist and hit Lu Qi from top to bottom. Although Lu Qi's strength was slightly greater than Old Fifth's, he didn't dare to take Old Fifth's punch head-on. He could only use the momentum of his forward charge to continue forward and dodge Old Fifth's attack. Old Fifth's punch missed. His body somersaulted again and landed on the ground. This round, the two of them were evenly matched. They did not even touch each other's fists. Looking at Old Fifth, who was standing on the side, Lu Qi was suddenly furious. He did not expect Old Fifth to be so difficult to deal with. He originally thought that he could defeat his opponent with a few punches and kicks, but it took him so long. Chapter 124. Seeing that he couldn't take down Old Fifth in such a short time, Lu Qi was furious. He gritted his teeth and decided to give Old Fifth a taste of his own medicine. Thinking of this, Lu Qi didn't hold back anymore. He snorted coldly and took a step forward. Then, he took a deep breath and threw a punch at Old Fifth's face again. The speed of this punch was clearly much faster than the previous one. Old Fifth didn't dare to be careless when he saw this, but he didn't dare to dodge either. This was because as long as he dodged, Lu Qi would definitely launch an endless stream of attacks to chase after him. Therefore, he had to block it. Old Fifth saw that Lu Qi's fist wasn't far away. He hurriedly waved his arm to meet Lu Qi's arm, wanting to block his attack. However, Lu Qi snorted coldly. Just as the two fists were about to collide, he suddenly retracted his hand like lightning. Then, he quickly threw another punch at Old Fifth. Old Fifth hurriedly stretched out his other hand to block his enemy's attack. At this time, the two were not far away. Seeing that his attack was blocked, Lu Qi retracted his hand to dodge Old Fifth's interception and attacked again. Old Fifth hurriedly blocked with his hand. The two were too close, and it was too late to change his move. Their arms suddenly collided, and their bodies swayed. Lu Qi took advantage of this moment to throw another punch. Old Fifth wanted to block it again, but it was too late. He could only grit his teeth and take Lu Qi's punch head-on. Ah! The strength of Lu Qi's punch was not small. After Old Fifth was hit, he immediately let out a scream and took 2 steps back. Lu Qi didn't let him go. Seeing that Old Fifth was retreating, he didn't plan to let him go. He also took 2 steps forward and quickly chased after him. At the same time, he threw another punch at Old Fifth. Old Fifth was already unsteady from Lu Qi's attack. Seeing that Lu Qi's fist was coming again, he had no choice but to raise his arm and fight in panic. Seeing this, Lu Qi sneered. He didn't dodge his fist. Instead, he increased the momentum of his fist and threw it at Old Fifth like lightning. Just as their fists collided, Ol 5 felt a huge force coming from his opponent's fist. It shook him so much that he lost his balance and stumbled a few steps back. Lu Qi had the upper hand and was unwilling to let go. Seeing that Lao Wu's body was unstable, how could he let go of such a good opportunity? Lu Qi did not stop. As Old Fifth retreated, he quickly took a few steps forward and caught up with Old Fifth again. He punched out with both fists at the same time, preparing to completely knock Old Fifth down this time. Although Old Fifth did not have a lot of combat experience, when he saw that the enemy's fist was powerful, he panicked and fought back. He knew that he would not be able to block it. Thinking of this, Old Fifth's body suddenly bent to the side and rolled away, dodging Lu Qi's attack. Seeing OL-5 rolling away on the ground, Lu Qi was stunned for a moment. Then, a sinister smile appeared on his face. He stomped hard on the ground with both feet and suddenly jumped up. The place where he landed was exactly OL-5. Old Fifth's expression changed drastically when he saw Lu Qi jump up. If Lu Qi's huge body fell on him, he would definitely end up with broken bones and tendons. Thinking of this, Old Fifth did not dare to be negligent. He hurriedly exerted force and rolled to the side again. After Lu Qi fell from the sky, he missed his step. He only snorted coldly and jumped up again to stomp on Old Fifth. Lu Qi was very fast. Almost as soon as he missed, he immediately jumped up and continued to stomp on Old Fifth. The situation was critical. Old Fifth did not even have time to stand up. He could only roll around on the ground to avoid Lu Qi's attack. Han Lin, who had been watching the battle from the side, frowned when he saw this situation. Seeing that Lu Qi could not take down Old Fifth, he suddenly shouted in a low voice, "All of you, stop!" After hearing Han Lin's words, Lu Qi saw that he could not take down Old Fifth in a short time. He could only curse angrily and return to Han Lin's side. Taking advantage of the fact that Lu Qi stopped attacking him, Old Fifth hurriedly stood up and wiped the cold sweat on his forehead. Seeing that Old Fifth had stood up, Han Lin slowly walked over to him. When he came in front of Old Fifth, Han Lin asked faintly, "Old Fifth, what do you think of the matter just now?" Old Fifth was stunned when he heard this. Then, he said angrily, "How can this do? This matter clearly has nothing to do with us. Why do you want us to admit it?" Han Lin did not wait for Old Fifth to finish speaking. He immediately waved his hand and interrupted him. He asked impatiently, "Old Fifth, I'm not asking for your opinion. I want to ask you, do you admit it or not?" After Old Fifth heard Han Lin's words, he subconsciously took 2 steps back to put some distance between him and Han Lin. Then, someone said, "This matter has nothing to do with us. I won't admit it." After Old Fifth finished speaking, Han Lin frowned again and asked coldly, "Old Fifth, I'll ask you one last time. If you don't admit it, don't blame me for being rude." When Old Fifth heard Han Lin's cold words, he could not help but feel a chill in his heart. Cold sweat appeared on his forehead again. Han Lin was different from Lu Qi. Although Lu Qi was big in size, his martial arts were only average. Han Lin was different. Han Lin's martial arts were even better than Li Tai's. If they were to really compare, 5 Lu Qis would not be able to defeat 1 Han Lin. In addition, Han Lin was a vicious person. Anyone who offended him would not have a good ending. Seeing the coldness in Han Lin's eyes, Old Fifth could not help but shiver. He swallowed hard and said, "It wasn't us who did it. We didn't do this. Li Tai went crazy himself. It's his own fault, not ours." Just as Old Fifth said this, he saw a shadow flash in front of him. In the next moment, he felt a grip on his neck and his body was lifted into the air. Han Lin grabbed Old Fifth's collar and lifted him up. Looking at Old Fifth, who was struggling non-stop, Han Lin asked coldly, "I'll ask you one more time. Do you admit it?" Old Fifth struggled in the air but could not break free from Han Lin's grip. When he heard Han Lin's question, he hurriedly shook his head. "Senior Brother Han, we really didn't do this. You can ask the others." It was really Li Tai who went crazy. Just as old Fifth said this, he saw a cold glint flash across Han Lin's eyes. When old Fifth saw this, he was shocked. He cursed in his heart and struggled even harder. In the next moment, old Fifth, who was still struggling, suddenly flew out. He flew 4 to 5 meters before landing heavily on the ground. Old Fifth flew very high and fell very hard. As soon as he landed on the ground, he screamed miserably. He felt incomparable pain all over his body. It was as if the bones in his body were about to break. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.